to order. This is the special Board of Education meeting for July 8th, 2020. If you would, please join me in the flag salute. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and we are going to begin our discussion action calendar with business services, and this has to do with amendment to leaseback agreement, beam repairs at Chico Junior High, and demolition of the Shapiro Pool. Is Julie joining us, or are you going to handle this, Kevin?
I will handle this.
You will, okay.
I will handle it. So we did receive a letter from CARD, Chico Area Recreation District, that in effect ended our lease with Shapiro Pool. The pool is owned by the district and has been in a long-term lease over 30 years with CARD, who has maintained and operated the pool for many, many years in our community. I think you know, if you're in our community, you know how difficult it has been for CARD to maintain that pool to the point where they really were not utilizing it for the last few years. And they actually put out a bond measure to provide additional revenue to improve the pool and then provide some revenue to maintain and operate it. That, however, failed. And so we did receive a letter that ended the lease. So the district now will take back the pool itself as far as complete ownership and maintenance, and what we have is a real liability issue, frankly. The pool is in very bad shape, and using CARD's estimates of costs to improve and fix that pool, we're over $10 million to do that work, and operating costs over $500,000 a year. So our recommendation at this point in time, knowing that that pool really creates a large liability issue for us, knowing that pools are not part of our facility master plan, our recommendation is that we modify or add an addendum to the leaseback contract that we have with United Builders, thank you, because they are already on site doing work as beam repair in the multi-purpose room and in the library area. They can do this work. When I say do the work, it would be raising or demolishing the pool itself and all of the pump and mechanical equipment. We would like to keep the building that's there. It has restrooms in it and could be used for storage, and we've talked to the school site about that, and they think that's a good idea. So at this point in time, what we're asking the board is to give an approval for us to modify the leaseback contract to include raising, demolition of Shapiro Pool, and we'd like to do it this summer when students are away and get that liability taken care of as quickly as possible.
Okay, any questions, Kathy?
Yeah, so two things. One, there's never a mention in anything that I saw that was CARD giving us a financial payment on the lease?
No, we had not actually. They were taking over the operations of it. We were not receiving any revenue from that lease.
So it was just a maintenance lease. Okay, that's one, thank you. And then the second one is, we do have another pool that was featured on the news last night as the Chico Aquanets were able to go back to practice. And that's at,
Bidwell.
thank you. I went B, but I didn't think of it. So I hope that we are maintaining that pool and don't end up with the same kind of liability.
So I actually appreciate that question because it clarifies something. We do not own that pool.
Okay.
That is actually a pool owned by CARD.
Okay.
They own the land, not only the pool, but the building next to it.
Okay.
And it happens to be next to our junior high, but it is not our property. So
Okay.
the only pool we have currently is Shapiro Pool.
And we think that, and I ask this because the aquajets that were, interviewed and filmed as going back to practice and being thrilled to death, I mean, they're obviously our physical students, age-wise. So as far as we know, they are maintaining that pool CARD.
Yes, I believe they are maintaining it. It is being used, and our high school teams use it for practice. But I will say, one of the issues with CARD going out to a bond and looking at building a new pool is that the pool at Bidwell is not does not meet their needs for competition.
Yeah,
So the
no, it's too small.
So the reality is Shapiro Pool, even if we were to improve it, really does not meet the needs of our teams and our students, and it's not really part of our physical education program anyway. So,
I think that clarification is important.
yeah,
Exactly.
Because
I agree.
if the TV channel is, here are the kids, they're obviously high school kids, here's the pool, and then they're gonna go, well, they do have a pool, because you say it's our responsibility. So I think there should be some clarification in the public notice of what we're doing. With that, I move the demolition of Shapiro Pool to be included in it's not, it's United Builders, right? Yeah,
I'll second that motion.
okay.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Eileen Robinson. I have a question. Julie,
Thank you too.
can you hear me? Julie?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, I wasn't sure, because I don't think you can see me, but I, it's Liz, I'm over here on this side. So when this raising of this pool is accomplished, what sort of condition will that piece of property be in? Will it be in a condition to build something new on then?
Yes, we're being very careful. We will have to import some fill to fill the hole. Obviously, that's going to be left by the vacant area. And we're making sure that that is clean fill and compacted for future use, for a building pad if necessary in the future. But in the meanwhile, we will put asphalt over the top and just extend Chico Junior's blacktop area.
Okay, and so it will, it's fenced in now, so you'll take the fence out and just extend the blacktop?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Linda, you got a
I
question?
did have a question, it's a Julie question. Did we not already do work on the beams at Chico Junior? I thought we did some beam repair there maybe a couple of years ago.
It is currently underway right now.
Okay, but we hadn't done it before. It was
No,
Rosedale?
you may be confusing that with the beam repair at Pleasant Valley High School gym.
Yeah, we did that one
We
too,
did
but,
those on 2 occasions.
all right.
I think there were some elementary schools
There
as
were,
well.
I know that there was.
Rosedale has some.
Yeah.
Research it.
So
Rosedale.
there are 5 different buildings, and we started with the 2 at Chico Junior. And after we get done with these 2, we'll move on to Chapman, Sierra View, and Rosedale.
and you have heard about these for a while, because we
Is
realized that.
that why I'm,
Yeah.
for a
Correct.
long while?
We've done a lot of, yes, we've done a lot of
Because remember when
investigation.
TV first came
Right,
up, that was like a couple years ago,
Yeah, it was
wasn't
a
it?
couple years ago.
So, yeah, this has been an ongoing
Okay,
type of thing, so.
all right, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to take a vote?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Tom? Griffin, aye. Robinson, aye.
Kaiser, aye.
Hubby, aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Julie. Next up is an item that has to do with conceptual design development update for Inspire. And we talked about this at our last meeting. Who's gonna talk? Julie?
Julie.
Okay,
Yes, I apologize, our department had made an error and it wasn't brought to you as an action item before, so you were unable to take action. So we're bringing it back to you to approve the conceptual design for Inspire School of Arts and Sciences at Canyon View.
I move the conceptual design update for Inspired School, but I think we should talk for another 20 minutes.
I'll second it, there's no extra 20 minutes.
okay, all right. So we have a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Tom Lando. Any further questions or discussion?
No, I just think it's a really exciting project and, you know, it's timeline, so let's make it
Yeah.
happen.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Next up is a human resources item, which Kevin is going to talk about. It's the declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
And I just wanted to clarify, Jim had vacation scheduled, he is in Texas, I believe.
That
Before
was
we
not a good
scheduled-
location.
Before we scheduled the special board meeting, so we're glad that he's enjoying some time away.
Yes.
So this is an action that we bring to you every year. at this time. It really gives us flexibility as we're entering into the new school year with kind of a truncated timeline. If we have to fill positions, that gives us the flexibility we need. The numbers are consistent to what we brought to this board in prior years, and we do ask that you approve this to give the Human Resources Department the flexibility and the tools that they need to fill positions quickly as the new year starts.
I move passage of the human resources resolution on fully qualified educators.
I'll second it, but I have a question.
Okay, motion by Eileen Robinson, second by Dr. Kaiser. Question?
Yes, so one of the most frequent comments that was being brought up in our survey, that you didn't get was this query about what about subs, how are we gonna get subs, if somebody has to self-quarantine. The ER ran a story of someone, just the other day on the first page. So it was asked fairly frequently, so that's a question. I don't know what kind of stipulation that do we make a stipulation around that issue of the subs or what?
Well, I will say Human Resources is actively filling the pool of substitutes all the time so that we have a pool available as needed, which is really separate than this certification piece. This does not get in the way of that process. So we've been effective in Chico of being able to get people that are able to be in the classroom. Obviously, having a teacher that has a long connection with students with a proper certification is where we want to live.
Right.
But the ability to get substitute teachers has not been an issue for us, and we don't expect it to be even in the future.
Recently, after we changed the sub rate,
That's
because prior to that,
It was
right, we
probably-
did have a hard time.
I know, I
getting
thought
subs.
we did. and,
Right, but since we increased the sub rate to be competitive in the region, we've had very few instances, some occasionally on a Friday or a Monday.
It seemed like they were tiering it around the issue of having to quarantine or isolate for 14 days and the issue of online versus classroom. That seemed to be the tiering.
So I will say, and this will take a lot more discussion, but it did come up in our discussions with Kevin Moretti and Charlie Snyder, where we may want to look at having some subs that are specific to individual sites. And we do know at our high schools, we need a sub, at least one every single day. So if we can minimize the rotation throughout the district and
yeah.
have them more isolated at school sites, that could be advantageous for many reasons, for educational, instructional reasons, as well as health reasons.
Okay.
In an emergency, also admin can sub for their credential, and so
What?
can part-time teachers. So
All you do
there's
is English.
I know, I just sat around. But so in emergent situations, we can plug admin or part-time teachers in.
Okay.
But I'm sure that's another issue we will discuss as this
Absolutely.
goes further, and what they're gonna be required to do as far as to assure their safety.
He knows.
You're good, you're
He
good.
knows he's gonna go around?
Yeah, he does not need to bring stuff in.
He's doing the delivery.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Are we ready to take a vote? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right, so we move on then to the main topic that we're here to discuss, which is informational. We are not going to take a vote on this, but we are going to discuss what the return to school might look like.
All right, Jay,
All right.
you and your team.
Share the document, Erica. Sorry, we'll get it up. I don't know if you guys all have copies in front of you, and some of it might have been changed. We did some editing this morning, so the ones on the screen will be the ones that we'll be talking about today. I also want to let you know, when we get started, that we have the health department, the Butte County Health Department is going to be zooming in at 10 a.m. So I want to do the informational stuff for you on these slides, and then we'll kind of dive in deeper into the information and the comments that we've gotten from community, parents, and the group that has been working with us every Monday. Okay, so first, our norms. So we're just going to discuss the process today about reopening the option, so we know it's just discussion for this meeting today. Also, we will review the elements of the return to the school plan. And we will have our survey data that we've sent out from our staff and our parents today to share with you. And then we will also give you additional feedback that was solicited by our DLC and the community today. So we'll be giving you all that information today.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Kelly, did you want me to check to see if this person, what this person?
She's
That's
staff
Linda.
member,
She's,
we're good.
okay.
Do we know if there, how many people are watching us?
Right now, it shows about 30.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay, so the next slide. Are you there? We're gonna pass it back.
Just hit that.
Fix
I
it.
will exit us or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. All right, so the next slide, again, go to the next, is our safety guidelines that we pushed out again last board meeting. Again, I'm not gonna go over each one of the details underneath, but it's under the sanitation, our PPEs, our personal protective equipment, our health screening and social distancing. There will be guidelines that right now that we will have in any model that comes forward after the next board meeting. So all these guidelines will be in effect, yes.
So I think, for the people that are watching, but also when we see all the kind of repetitive comments, that we need to strongly reiterate that the protection things, the safety guidelines, are consistent. CNN did a special on the virus and noted that there were entire states who would have placed an order, paid for it, have it delivered, and have it stolen by somebody with higher bidding before they could even pick it up. So the question is, we ordered 800 masks, what timeline will they get? Because I think when we have the teachers doing the trainings and they should be experiencing the mask and getting familiar with how it affects them as they're doing their practice teaching, etc. So what's the answer to that?
Yeah, we have ordered some, we already have gotten some in, and they believe that we'll be getting them, what we've ordered in the next few weeks. Marcus French has done a great job of developing relationships with different purchasing companies for these things, so we are been in front of this. We know that we will have all 800 shields that will have been ordered in time for school. We just placed in an order yesterday for 50,000 masks. I don't want to say facial coverings, for also the portable ones, the disposable ones, and we also are now getting in different cloth models for us to look at too, if we have direction that we want to possibly purchase so many cloth face coverings for our students too, so they have for the week and wash them. So we will have them, Kathy. Marcus believes that we will have everything that we need to start the school. Doesn't mean whatever we decide to go with, that we're gonna have to be on top of that continually.
So I just sent the board the status update on
Thank
the
you.
personal protective equipment.
Yeah, it came out yesterday.
So
So you don't need to rent my black German shirt.
Not yet.
So
Okay.
just out of curiosity, are the masks gonna be like the one Kathy's wearing?
Yes, there's 800 of those that are ordered.
So that's what it will be like?
Yeah, they will have face shields ordered for every one of our teachers to have one, and other people in our offices to have them, our nurses obviously, and the staff
In
inside the
addition
office.
to the traditional.
Additional to the traditional masks that you
But
can wear.
that's the type, I mean.
Correct.
Correct.
That's pretty, exactly like it?
I'm not gonna say exactly,
Exactly.
because the ones I saw had a thicker headband.
Yeah,
Probably, this just goes over your nose like glasses, but see, that would be an issue
Uh-huh.
for you wearing glasses, so there are other ones
Oh,
that
yeah.
are more headband kind of
Where
thing.
did you get yours?
The League of Women Voters, used our authority, and the outgoing president got them for us,
Oh, okay.
so.
Okay. So there's, obviously there's different suppliers
Yeah,
and there's
there are.
different versions. I heard that
Versions.
Chico State was making them, that's why I
They
wondered
were,
if that's where
and
you
they're
got them.
making the more heavy-duty ones. If you go to Safeway, you can see some of the students who are Chico State students work there, and some of them are wearing them too. The checkout areas where there's the greatest amount of back and forth talking close to a person, they're wearing them.
Mhm.
Because the mask, there's a lot of air issues with the mask.
Right.
So just very quickly, touchless thermometers, we've ordered 800. 20 have already been received, 105 shipped, 675 shipped next week. Cleaning kits for custodians have been ordered. Facial coverings, 50,000 have been ordered. It's a local vendor, so we feel very confident on that. Face shields, I actually this says 1,000 have been ordered.
Okay, perfect.
Sanitation stands, 70 have been ordered. And plexiglass dividers, 35 sheets were purchased from Home Depot, and our M&O is doing for high traffic areas, plexiglass sheets, and we expect we may need to do more of those.
Yeah.
So, I did email that to you, and it has some expectation of delivery dates as well. But I do, well, I just wanna remind the board, we need to get through this before our 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
and then we can do what we need to do.
Yeah, we definitely want the plexiglass. Julie's done a great job of trying to get those ready for all of our offices, so when families come in, we have that to protect also. All right, so I want to go over our learning models one more time, and I'm going to pass off the elementary and secondary in just a second. But this, what you're seeing now, is our traditional model if social distancing is not mandated. So that means that they haven't come in and said, we want 6 feet apart inside the classroom. Right now, we're suggesting as Ed Services, this is a model that we would like to see go through if social distancing does not get mandated. But again, this is just a discussion for you guys right now. First is the traditional model. We will have all the safety guidelines in place. Our classrooms will have 30 to 34 kids, or 24 at the K-3 model. But again, we will be asking, and if it is a mandate, we will have masks on our children, on our students. Again, that's up to what the state and county guidelines are going to be telling us on August 17th. Also, we have our Oak Ridge Academy Online learning model. That has been available for the past 3 years. That has not changed, and it did not change when we went to COVID.
Wait a minute, you didn't have elementary available.
We had Oakdale Elementary available, which was more of a packet-based available at Oak Ridge, but now it's online. So we've changed that up to get it more rigorous for our families.
Okay.
And then the blending learning model, where students can choose, or parents can choose for their child to go 4 periods at a high school or junior high, and 2 periods at Oak Ridge, or reverse. We're also looking at the blended model for elementary. We're trying to work out what that would look like, but right now we're considering they would come for 2 hours in the morning and then go to Oak Ridge for the remaining of their education. Yes, Eileen?
With the partial day model, is the 2 at either program, either online or in person, and then the other, is that what we have to comply with to get ADA?
Well, we like the 4 and 2 model because we want the ADA needs to go to one school or the other. Because if you go 3 periods and 3 periods,
Right.
you can't give ADA to both
Right.
schools. So we're always trying to go 4 periods or 2 periods. So if it's
ADA.
if it's 4 classes at Oak Ridge, they get the ADA for that student, and the 2 periods at the other school, then they would not.
Okay.
But we snap by sections, so the funding on the
Yeah.
secondary model will work out. We're still having discussions about
About
what the
elementary.
elementary model will look like, and that may be more classroom based.
So, my grandson, so he goes 2 classes in person at Chico High, but the other 4 are independent study. So what do we call that?
So there's really 3 versions. There's independent study that's more of a textbook packet, traditional independent study. Then on each high school site, there's a Panther and a Viking Academy, which are virtually the same as Oak Ridge, but we have those on site.
They're on site, yes.
Correct. And then the 3rd version is Oak Ridge. So really there are 3 independent study options.
And will all those still be available under these?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right.
Yep.
Yes.
And actually, we're preparing for staffing
Yeah.
increases, we're preparing for student enrollment increases at Oak Ridge because of the conversations we're having. There was a training this week for teachers interested in being a part of Oak Ridge. So the back preparation is also happening, not knowing where we're gonna be in August.
So just to let you know that we are trying to move away from the packet. This summer, our summer school was completely online, which we had 278 kids complete summer school.
10 credits each.
10 credits each. So that was great. So we're trying to phase that in. Mr. Mall, the principal at Fairview, is trying to do that with the Oakdale model over there. So eventually we want to switch over. Also, the online academies at the high schools used to be a Mentum. Now everybody's Ingenuity, just like Oak Ridge. So we all are on the same page when it comes to what model of curriculum we're using for online.
So this past summer's group of kids, students, were they kids that were all at risk of not moving on to the next grade, or was there some acceleration
There
Wow.
wasn't acceleration. The majority of the kids were kids who were credit deficient, but we did have also some kids whose parents felt they needed some interventions from remediation because of the 25% of their school year
Oh, yeah.
wasn't the same as the other 75. So there was a mix. I would say it was about a 90-10 mix of credit deficient with kids who needed remediation.
Since we implemented that summer school program, it's really allowed more students to stay on our campus sites. So that's been an important one.
Good.
Okay, if we look at the next slide, it's some of our first survey data that comes out. These are from our families. And this is that social distancing is not mandated within the classroom. So we asked them if facial coverings, secondary option with facial coverings and without. And then we asked the same thing for elementary. So as you can see, families are saying if facial coverings are mandated, they would say 57.5% said they would go to the traditional school, 13.5% would go to Oak Ridge, and the 29% would like a blended model. And it skips over on secondary. If they're not mandated facial coverings, it goes all the way up to 67.5%. And you can see the other two schools kind of even out at 18 and 14. Then the elementary options are pretty similar when it comes to the mask. Almost 57% said they would choose traditional with mask on, 25% some type of blended model, and 18% would like Oak Ridge. Then it jumps up to 72% if masks are not mandated. Again, I did in perspective, and I want to get moving through the long just because we have the health department. Last year, we only had 60 people at Oak Ridge, 60 students. If you look at 18% and 13%, remember this is about 5,000 people put in surveys of those people. We're talking 1,000 students on our online program. To put that in perspective, as of this survey data showing it, it might change. But again, we talked to 48 teachers about the Oak Ridge model, a mixture of elementary and secondary about this that have put in interest about possibly if they needed teachers to move there. So we talked to them about what those models look like. Rhonda Odom did an excellent job of talking about what the secondary model looks like. Ingenuity, Ted talked about what the elementary model is going to look like. So they know what they're walking into. Then we told them about what the trainings we'll be offering in August 5th and 6th and also in August 13th to get them trained. We're looking at right now possibly wanting to train everybody in our district with these models just in case we get taken off of our school grounds and so we can do a better job of distance learning than what our parents thought was this last year, March, April.
Okay, so my question, so Chico State online accept, and they have a whole accept that's around criteria-based actual labs, you know, where you really, so how are we handling the sciences that are required for, you know, to be accepted into universities and with the online learning? How are they getting that actual?
Edgenuity has modules and virtual labs that are UC and CSU approved. They also have AP curriculum that is part of a package. We researched a week ago what it would cost to put 6,600 secondary students into Edgenuity, and then because they have different packages, you know, with different levels.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so we've been doing that research as well. But to answer your question, yeah, there are students doing it right now, regardless of COVID.
Okay, so they are approved lab
Yeah.
certificated.
Yeah.
And we would, if we have to go to some type of model like that where they said and shut down your schools, we want it to be able to be a very easy transition to that. And so we want our teachers to be exposed to what those curriculum look like. So they're not learning on the fly over 24, 48 hours on how to do that. So we'll be offering trainings. We're looking at our professional development budget and how we can do that and more days to add more training because we want to be prepared for that. Kevin already has asked for that also for his people, so we're going to be doing that. We're also looking at, we want to be able to bring to you the board. If we have to go to buy 6,600 Ingenuity license, we're going to need approval budget-wise to purchase those on the fly, and we're ready for that. Like, they've done a great job of researching what that would be, and then Ted's already had people working on his models for elementary throughout the year.
On Monday mornings, we've been planting seeds with teachers and folks about if we do have to pull out, let's say, whatever schedule we may be in October, we're not going to go back to distance learning. We're going to go to online learning.
Okay.
And online learning provided by Edgenuity.
Yeah.
It'll be messy to match up where the students and teachers are with where Edgenuity could be, but they have modules within each course. And so It'll be messy, but after a couple of weeks, we feel like we can merge, and that's the idea behind having as many teachers as we can be trained in Edgenuity, regardless of whether we're gonna use it or not.
No, I think
And John, it might be good for you to send out the video that Rhonda put together, so that will give the board some, insight into, Tom's Thank you.
but it won't be possible to blow up the wall with your first year chemistry activity.
It's still possible.
They'll make it happen.
But the one wall at home.
Not at home.
Yeah.
It won't be one of our walls.
We did that at my house too, at home, yes, my brother.
Yeah, I think that training for the whole staff is incredibly important. And if we can- the closer we can get to making that as close to mandatory as possible, just given the unknown nature of the numbers and severity of this. There's always a chance we will have to go, and
Right.
it's super important.
Yeah, it's very good that the budget what came out kind of let this year be more of a safety net kind of year budget-wise for us to have our Title II dollars, which is our professional development dollars, and our Title IV dollars to push out this training, because, I mean, you're thinking you're training over 700 people.
Right. What about CTE?
We offer some CTE courses also.
CTE as well with
Ingenuity.
intro classes, concentrator, and capstone. They have all
So
three.
they can get certified?
They can.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
Well, Edgenuity, like all the other programs, they're adapting to the, they
Same
want to
thing
make
as
it all,
well.
so they're adapting to what districts are asking for.
So those CTE courses that are 2 for 2, Butte College and us?
We would have to go through all the process,
Okay,
and we'd still have to go through all the process to be sure that the AP classes that we select are UC approved,
okay.
just to be sure they are. We do our due diligence. Deanna Holland and Sarah Pacias are already working on that. They have a list of courses that they're trying to match.
Also we're gonna want the community to understand, because right now we're hearing from them, we don't want, as much as we're happy with our teachers and what they were trying to do with distance learning and checking in and doing the best they can, it's not a model that we want to see for our students going forward if we have to go back that way. So we really wanna let them know, this is what we're prepared for now. We had 48 hours before, but now we've had over summer to plan. If we have to go back that model, we feel we'll be ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, make no doubt about it, our teachers were amazing, and we heard that from our parents, that they really appreciated the work they did in that very 3-day turnaround time. But the concern that comes out is, we knew we had to do that last year. Now that we've had some more time to plan, we need to have a curriculum that is consistent across grade levels, consistent across subject levels, consistent in application, has rigor, ties to the standards, and is actually teaching new concepts. So in order to get there with such a wide variety of online learning experience our teachers have had, we've had some that had none until the spring, and then others that have done it on a more consistent basis. We really need a consistent platform, and that's what Ed Services has worked to provide.
I really appreciate very much the idea of presenting to them a Facebook interaction so they can kind of see. It doesn't and it can't answer the issue of the households that the parents just feel completely, I can't do this, because that's the other strain, and that's a huge strain on their
I
side.
think you saw that division in the data that came back from the parents.
Oh,
So we'll kind of explain in the modified traditional if we have to go, if they, first we're gonna start with elementary, a couple modified traditional models, if they say we have to do social distancing in the classroom, Ted?
Talk about those?
Yeah.
Like Jay said, we keep trying to tell every time we get a chance, this is only if we have to go to this model. We're trying to try to through that lens with it. We've really centered around 2 models. One the AM, PM in some version of that, where half the kids come in the morning, half the kids come in the afternoon loosely with the changeover time, with some of those kinds of things. And there's been, how that looks exactly. There's a whole bunch of is it going to be a half-hour changeover, an hour? How's lunch going to happen? A bunch of variations that can happen within that to make it doable. It really does center around, staff was real interested to see their kids every day. They really felt like that was the best kind of instructional pattern to have, especially teaching reading groups with primary students, some of those kinds of things. So there's actually some initial staff interest with doing some of those kinds of things and having an AM/PM model. The other model that's on here is we talk about alternating day model, where half the kids come for a whole day, and they kind of alternate. I mean, using an example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday the following week. So staff would see half of their kids for a full day, and out of a 10-day cycle, they would see them about half the days, about 5 days, kind of just revolving through that over time. And we'll get through it later, you'll see kind of staff and parents see a whole bunch of pros and cons with both of those, and it's interesting because what some see as a pro, others saw as a con with the exact same model, so I'd say it was kind of depending on the lens they were looking at. Like one of them I think was the alternating day. Some people saw seeing students 5 days out of 10 as a real pro, and I think they were comparing that to not seeing them at all. Others felt like seeing them 5 days out of 10 was not enough, and they wanted to see them on a daily basis with some of those kind of things also. So really, those are where we land with elementary, is kind of either AM, PM, and getting half the kids in, cycling it through, having a core chunk of instruction in the morning or afternoon. All the teachers I've talked to said we would be doing language arts and math. Reading and math would be that core part. They'd be sending kind of follow-up, supporting activities at home with language arts, social studies, science kinds of things. Also, we'd be doing home-based with it. Similar, it would almost, if you think of if they did an alternating schedule, teachers would almost have a 2-day lesson plan with part of it kind of the introduction, instruction part, with supplementary kind of, we call it homework loosely, would be kind of what's happening at home then with parents or guardian support at home kind of thing. So teachers would start putting kind of a 2-day lesson plan structure together with an alternating model like that also.
I have a quick question,
Yeah.
Ted. Have we been able to find any data on the advantages and disadvantages of these models? Or is it because this is so completely suddenly new?
I've
we
not
don't
heard
know?
or seen anything. I mean, I see a lot of kind of philosophical kind of thoughts about it, and I've read a whole bunch of pros and cons about all of it. I've not seen anything that's really like been researched.
Yeah.
And to be clear, none of the alternative models would actually be doable in a traditional time, right? Because you reduce the number of minutes that don't meet the daily minutes or the annual minutes that are required if we were not in a COVID environment. So there's not going to be research out there that says these are ideal models. And we've heard that loud and clear from our teachers that, holy cow, we're cutting down the time that we have with kids, we're cutting down our instructional time, prep time is different. So there's lots of things not to like, but these are not ideal times.
No, I was just wondering if something had occurred at some point somewhere, even in Europe, looking at some of the more non-traditional things.
I think it's probably too early to have data.
Yeah.
But when I look around the state and the nation, and I have not really looked deep into any of the European models or international models,
Well,
you're seeing the same kind of models coming up because there's only really so many options.
There were some things where students, especially the younger students, had been taken out of the classroom and did a lot of their learning in an environmental setting and tied, just things that were being tried that had good success. So I just wondered if, somebody tried this and.
Yeah, lots of good, interesting thoughts, Eileen, but I've not seen anything that's what we call a research study about it.
Yeah, thank you. Patty?
Yeah, so, one of the aspects that I seem to hear the most back from parents and teachers is that, all of these kids have moved up a grade. I got one coming in at kindergarten and I got one going into second. So I think the exposure to the teacher is even a socialization effect of what do you do in school that's different than what you do at home. The 7-year-old bopped the 4-year-old on the head and said it was okay because he had on a helmet. So what was the problem? There's logic to that, but the 4-year-old was mad.
Different version of PPE happening there.
Yeah, right there. So the context of it is, it seemed like that many of the teachers were also stating how critical it was to them to get to know their students.
Several, Kathy, commented, doing everything via online, they just don't have that same connection with students. They just said it's not possible. That's why a lot of teachers were really desiring having some kind of time with them on a consistent basis.
And I have to say from my experience at EWE, the kindergarten and first grade teachers are just amazing at their ability to have these students become a unit and be very responsive. Very impressed.
We're talking a lot of what ifs, right? So I have a what if question, and alternative models, we're gonna have less instructional minutes,
Mm-hmm.
face-to-face with teachers. Has the state said anything about SBAC testing for this coming up year?
Yeah, they just sent something out. Tim, do you have on that?
What was, I didn't, which, on the
The
what? on-
SBAC
Oh,
testing?
State
SBAC, okay.
testing.
Are we gonna be looking at that for 2021 in the spring?
there.
23, 24.
Tim, are you there?
This,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, the state has given us no indication that they have plans to cancel testing,
Interesting.
or as if will be.
Yeah.
Pretty early though.
23,
Yeah.
24.
It's very early in that.
Yeah, again, it's a what if.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Tim.
Couple comments on this. First of all, as a social studies teacher, I have a real strong belief that that's equally as
Mhm.
important, you know, citizenship portion in elementary school. So is there a chance that we can offer, and actually just offer a PD of some sort to elementary school teachers? I know a lot of them already are very good at blending the English language portion, English social studies and math with science, but I think offering them extra chances to find out how to connect.
I think the
those.
online ELA curriculum we bought is much, just as a nice plethora mix of science and social studies kind of focus with those things also. Without Wonders is kind of an upgraded Treasures version that's much more online friendly. It does a nice job pulling in a lot of kind of source, kind of nonfiction kind of materials in there with it also.
And we will be using our DLC and the people that we've been meeting with Monday about things that you're just saying, Tom, what else are you going to need, thinking ahead if we have to go to one of these models? What professional development are we going to need? So we're ready, because we're going to need to know, just like you're saying, I have to figure out how to blend in social science or science in the elementary world, where normally I would just have stuff that I had in my classroom. So how are we gonna do that when we're only seeing them for so much time? We really wanna get our English and math in, but how can we blend in the other subjects during that time? Then it's gonna have to be professional development with that.
On a similar note, in regards to building classroom continuity and whatnot, in the online platforms, it's super important to hopefully give teachers the opportunity, because you can't do Edgenuity just the kids doing it online completely and you're just there as a resource and a tutor. But we have a plan to supplement those with things like Zoom meetings and online
So-
workshops where they can actually interact with
In
this.
the elementary world, we're slightly different with Edgenuity. In the elementary world, we actually have it set up where teachers are gonna meet with their class every day online. That was one of the expectations we talked about, like Jay said, we had a conversation with all the interested teachers, and we said, here's the expectations, you're gonna do this many, math lessons every week, you're gonna do this many Zoom lessons, but one of them was, you're gonna meet with your class every day. If you look at a little elementary class, they do kind of a morning check-in time. If you walk into a kindergarten class, they have circle time, first thing, something in that vein where they're actually pulling together, checking with them. But then the other part we said is you're gonna meet with each student individually at least once a week also, to do kind of an academic and a social-emotional check-in with them also. And just make sure they're doing okay, supports they need, whatever it is that's happening there with it also.
And Tom, we're gonna need to figure out, because at the secondary level at Oak Ridge, we had tutorial times, like there was math times you could come in to get extra support, English times to come in extra support, the science labs where they went. We're going to need to figure out how we're gonna do now online tutoring times for math, so they'll be zooming in on certain things so kids can say, hey, I need help with math 1, or where we're at and stuff like that. We're gonna have to figure that out too, because we won't be able to bring in math kids coming in for tutorial time, so we're gonna have to try to blend that in.
And Tom, just one of the other differences with secondary, their caseload's a little bit different, a little higher just because of Edgenuity, it's kind of structured differently. Elementary, we would be more closely aligned with kind of the caseload is in a classroom setting also. So the ability to be one-on-one meeting with them, it's a little more doable if you've got 25 on your caseload versus if you've got.
It sounds like you're asking a lot of the teachers if they're gonna be meeting with students AM and PM and somehow running Zoom online group meetings and meeting with every kid individually.
So
That's a lot on the plate.
it is. The group that actually put it together was a group for DLC teachers. And we kind of said, is this doable?
Yeah,
Give us
let's see what
feedback
that
on it.
model for like
Is this-
model players it looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually put together kind of a template, here's what a typical day would look like, here's you can schedule things around it, et cetera, et cetera.
So you can share that with the board.
Yep. Yeah, happily share.
Much appreciated.
Okay, the next slide is just some of the data that came along with the elementary. Sorry, Erica gets where I went, 2 typewriters and up and. Okay.
This is what the parents were looking for.
Mhm.
When we asked parents what kind of model they felt would be best match for them, half of them were looking for the AM/PM model like that.
Okay, so we'll jump into the secondary.
We're gonna keep saying this again, this is only, if you're just dropping into this meeting, this is only if we're mandated to socially distance within the classrooms. So essentially, as we talked about in the last board meeting, We continue to have Oak Ridge available. There is a possibility for a blended model between Oak Ridge and whichever of these three, or something similar to these three, is decided upon if we have to go down this path. So the first schedule is essentially, if you imagine cutting the school in half and then in half again, and then students would only take 3 classes each semester. They would have a year's worth of material presented to them, and the second semester, they would take the other half of the schedule they've already been enrolled in because of the spring registration. So the registration, which resulted in staffing, has already taken place. So kids are already into schedules. Registrars would have the challenge of splitting those up. Essentially, you, as a site administrator or team, they would need to figure out how to best balance the departments, so you have as equal a number of kids on campus as you possibly could, right? So you balance if you have 3 art sections, you balance that with your 3 ag sections at Chico High, so there's an equal number and a split. So we're going to go through all the pros and cons. I'm just trying to give you a basic understanding. So kids would be in school for 3 classes each day, every other day, and they would have, by the end of the year, they would have their full allocation of credits.
But those classes would be longer.
They'd be longer. So that's the first model. The second model is basically an every other day models. It's a little different. Oh, I forgot to say with the first model, over the 2 weeks, they would see their teachers 5 times, right, over 2 weeks. In Model 2, the major difference between Models 1 and 2 is that students would see all their teachers on one day, let's just say Monday, for a very short period of time, 20, 25 minutes. It could be an SEL check-in. It could be kind of an advisory, tutorial, remediation, assessment, not assessment academically, but just an opportunity for check-in. And then the students would meet with their teachers twice more that week, either Monday and Wednesday or Thursday and Friday.
For again, 25 minutes?
No, for a longer period of time.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's about an hour long,
okay.
maybe 100 minutes. So they would have, and I want to make sure, and this will come out in the pros and cons, there's a significant amount of PD that's going to take place. I do want to note that we have a number of teachers already in the district who have taught on block schedules. So we rely on them for some coaching. So we'd have to figure out a way to make sure that happens. So the third option is essentially an AM/PM model. So again, you're splitting your school, dividing them out, and you have students attending either in the morning or in the afternoon. And there are a lot of nuances to each of these schedules. I'm just trying to go through it. So when we go to the pros and cons after the presentation or the conversation with the health department, we can discuss the pros and cons as they relate to each of the schedules.
John, when we went down to the Bay Area to look at the schools there, were they closer to the 3x3, or were they closer to the
They're closer to Model 2,
Model 2? That's what I thought.
right? And the
Okay.
focus there was standards-based instruction, standards-based grading.
Are all of these 3 modified options cost neutral? Where we're at now?
They're cost neutral from a staffing perspective. I think the big question we've been kicking around is the matching the students who stay in a schedule like this versus the ones that go to Oak Ridge entirely. And we're trying to work that equation out.
Okay, some of the data, I think it's on the next one, Erica. Sorry. There it is. Split.
It's split. I mean, it can't be much more split than it is.
Do you think because they don't understand, or do you think because literally they see so many pros and cons they can't make their?
These are complex models.
I know, they are.
To that end, would it be helpful if we produced like a sample schedule like
have
here,
it out.
here,
It is.
We do have it,
We have it.
we have it.
we put that on the website, is that there already?
Yeah, if you go back a slide, it's actually presented in the secondary options, the blue, I'm sorry, yeah, the bottom,
That link.
yep,
Oh,
Well, that's.
never looked at that.
yeah. So just knowing that
Oh,
we're,
that's helpful.
sorry, I know we have 8 minutes left.
I
so
know,
gotta
but
go.
that would have been, I didn't even
Question
look
was there.
at it.
Yeah, because having it painted out like that.
Yeah.
Some of us
I
need
know.
to see it
I know.
like
That's
that.
really helpful.
Yeah, and it also has it from a teacher perspective, and so
Okay,
teachers
sure.
can see.
That's great to know.
And I tell you, myself, I have to continue to go back, I had to look at it this
I have
morning
to see
again,
this.
you know, to remind myself of the differences.
Do a giant arrow pointing to that, so people at home, because I went right over it and
Yeah.
didn't.
So you can see on that data, still parents are choosing 11% straight online in Oak Ridge. 11% of 6,600 is, you know, we're talking 690 students.
How do you know that's parents?
That's who we sent this.
This is who we
This
sent
is the
this.
parent
Parent
survey?
survey, sorry.
'Cause-
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a little, were the students not also asked?
Well, funny you should
Funny you
ask
should
that
ask that.
question.
John, go ahead.
So, it's Kelly's idea, we're going to survey our students, some really simple questions. I actually sat with my daughter last night and wrote student-friendly language to send out a survey to kids, just to kind of see how they feel and what things they're worried about, see what we can ferret out. We also want to know the student groups, you know, is there a certain group that self-identifies based on their participation in something who are more worried about one thing than another group?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
grade levels. So we're gonna build that. Tim is the survey guru, so we're gonna work on that today and tomorrow and get that out hopefully over the weekend. And so we'll have that data provided for the next board meeting.
I think that's a brilliant idea, because I think you're gonna find really groups that are already communicating with each other all the time. They're
Sure.
athletes, or they're the performing artists, or, you know, whatever, the science nerds, and I think that'd be really important, because if we break up those social groups for them, I think we'll see a lot of extreme distraction or not connecting anymore to their
Not
schools.
engaged.
We've gotten great feedback from our students when we met with them in our LCAP meetings. And, you know, a lot of times they're like, aha, because they'll put it into simple terms for us when maybe sometimes we tend to overthink things. And a lot of our student ideas have ended up in our LCAP plans. So I appreciate John and Ted taking this on and getting some new input from the kids. It's great.
This is an interjection, and I know that I just saw the data, and you're looking at doing the implicit bias and those workshops, but they've already identified that Hispanics are a much larger percentage of our cases in our county. You may get racial stuff around the virus too.
Well, and even access to technology, we've been kicking around the idea of having hubs geographically placed, where if we are on an online environment, complete online environment, that we have those spaces available, sanitized with PPE for kids and their parents to come in once a day, once a week, whatever they need to do. So we're expanding that conversation too.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more slides to show you on some data from our staff and what they're telling us, what model they would like, if they were going to, I think we need to keep going.
Okay, who did these numbers?
I know, and we're gonna blame this on Tim.
Tim, because it didn't add up in any contextual way. What's 1 and 53 and 1 and 15? There's only 2 colors, and so I'm like,
Okay, so the big, the first one is
Let me
T.
walk you through that, Kathy.
what?
Let me walk you through that.
Oh yeah, because I don't see the other color, dude.
It's one person, yeah.
The 3 more, back, go back, sorry. One more, 2 more, ready?
You ready, Tim?
Yeah, I need to back up to the
Yeah,
First one,
the
sorry.
first one.
There we go.
Nope, one more.
One more down.
Alright. Other way.
No, forward.
Erica, you're jumping.
Right there.
Right there.
Okay,
I will,
stop.
because it's
Okay.
a touchy mouse.
First of all, we're reliant on people self-reporting when they turn in these surveys. So
Absolutely.
the mean as we would like. The purposes of this data is to give us and the board and the stakeholders watching a broad idea mind that this is only our classroom teachers that we're looking at here. Support staff, certificated support staff are not included here because what we're primarily concerned with right now is staffing and shifting staff to various models as needed.
So in the second circle, is that 115 or 1 in 15?
Okay, the second circle is, there's one person there and the sliver's so small with the dark blue that has a personal.
Personal health, okay.
That 15 elementary teachers indicated they wanted to go to Oak Ridge at that time, and since then they've met, like Ed and John spoke about, and some folks might change their mind after that. Majority of them want to come back in traditional.
Yeah.
So you see the similar pattern with secondary classroom teachers wanting to come back in traditional. So we actually see a higher percentage of our teachers wanting to come back in the traditional model than we see with our parents.
Yeah.
Wanting to come back. Okay. So move on to the next slide.
Well, here you at least have the split so you could identify.
So again, this is a broad overview. We obviously have the precise back-end data, but we can see that the vast majority of teachers at all levels are healthy and want to come back to work in a traditional setting. The next highest slice of that pie was is the light green. People that are healthy and concerned about coming back, just for their health and their family's health, was the second biggest pie chart.
So since they're saying they want to go online, these are teachers that are potentially available to be trained for.
Correct.
Okay.
And we reached out to those folks and invited them to a meeting on yesterday.
Yesterday.
Regarding what that would look like. So we expect some people, I believe some folks have already decided, no, I don't like that model, now that I know the details. The other colors here that are the tiny slivers, the personal health concern, a household member health concern.
What is
leave-
LOA?
That's leave of absence, and so people that have indicated they're requesting a leave of absence. So those are tiny slivers, but they're important to us, because we need to make sure that those folks, if they want online, have, this is all gonna come out in the MOU, have access to online if possible. And, but we do see the overall gist of this slide is most people wanna come back and work.
Tim, this is Eileen. How do the numbers work out for the ones that have identified that they would be willing to go to the online Oak Ridge? Do we have enough that have raised their hand to cover the ones that have indicated, at least at this point, that might be an option they prefer, that 11%?
I'm gonna defer to Jay and John and Ed on that one.
Okay.
I think it's close.
Close.
I mean, it's not wildly off, but it's like,
Okay.
in the elementary, there's about 10 or 15 teachers who are interested. As of this moment, we have about 400 or 500 students that were expressing interest, so it's not, it's close.
Yeah.
As far as what that would look like.
Just to remind everyone, it's 10:01.
So if we can go ahead and make the transition, we do have our guests from the Butte County Public Health that have joined in. Are they in on the Zoom? Two are, okay. And Kathy, I'm going to ask you if you would mind switching chairs.
Oh,
Getting
because it
some-
squeaks?
Yeah, we're getting some comments that
Yeah,
yours is squeaky and making it difficult on Zoom.
it is.
And I also want to address, as we make this transition to the health department, and I'm going to publicly thank Eileen for bringing this up to me, that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about students and staff.
Table.
Is it the table? Okay, we'll switch that in a minute then. That health is a very broad term. And as educators, we certainly are concerned about the medical health of students, but we also have concerns about the social health, emotional health, the academic health, and frankly, in some cases, the physical especially recognizing that 48% of our students live in homes that qualify for free and reduced lunch, that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. So I was getting myself stuck a little bit in the term health as our current environment. And what helped me understand that is if you had asked me about school safety a year ago, I automatically would have gone to school shootings and school violence. And now you ask me today about school safety, and the first thing that comes into my mind is COVID. So as we have this discussion, Butte County Public Health certainly has a role, and their goal is to minimize, eradicate COVID. Our goal is a different one, and that is to educate students in a variety of ways. So I just wanted to make that clarification as we went into this, that we all have different roles, and I think I was getting myself, pigeonholed on some things and need to remember our broader perspective. So with that, if we have our guests from Butte County Public Health online, on our Zoom, if you could introduce yourselves.
Show your face.
When they start talking, it should go to, we'll make sure we unmute you.
Hello, this is Monica Soderstrom from Butte County Public Health.
Hello, Monica.
Monica.
Thank you for joining us.
And this is Danette York, Director of Public Health for Butte County.
Hi, Jeanette.
Hi, Jeanette. Thank you for joining us. We sent some questions yesterday, and maybe a good way to get this started is to pick off some of the ones that you felt really comfortable and firm in answering, and that will lead us into the discussion. And I am sure there were some that you don't have answers to, because I know that is certainly the case for us. We have lots of questions. We don't have answers for most of them.
So Monica, you want to start?
Yeah, well, first, I will just say I've had the privilege of working with the BCOE planning group through the summer. I have participated in the weekly meetings that have included many of the BCOE superintendents, principals, some school nurses, and other staff members. So I think that actually many of the questions that you submitted have been being addressed or, carefully considered by that group. We have been working on a flow sheet of what would happen if there was an employee or a student on campus with COVID. And that final draft of that flow sheet actually, I believe, is getting approved at this week's meeting on Thursday. We've also been working with school nurses on what they can do if they have a student on campus that is symptomatic. And so, I really feel like the partnership between those education sector planners and public health have gone really well, and there'll be some really useful tools that all the schools will have available to use once students are back on campus. Wanted to let you all know that. And as far as there was a lot of questions about transmission on campus, about masks in here, about how, concerned should you be about transmission if, you're exposed at school and you have someone at home. I don't know if you want to just read through those questions and have me answer those, or how you would like to do that today.
Why don't you go ahead and read off one of those questions, and then, share your answer with us, and we will just go from there.
Sure. Okay, so one of the things that was asked is what was the most effective screening protocol for large groups like a student body? And there's just actually very clear guidance from the California Department of Public Health. It's in their industry guidance, and if you haven't looked at that, I would highly recommend that you do that. It was released on June 5th, and it does talk about how screening should happen for students on campus. And I know that part of the planning, group has looked at how that would be instituted on each campus. And the answer to that is specifically on page 10 and 11 of that guidance.
Could you summarize that just briefly for both the board members that are here and our viewing audience that don't have necessarily access to that document, a quick summary?
Yes, there will be what we call active monitoring for students when they come on campus, meaning that they will have their temperature taken and they will be asked about symptoms of COVID. And there is a protocol on what to do if there is a person that has a temperature of 100.4 or higher, or if they have symptoms.
Monica, this is Eileen. How often do they recommend this massive screening take place?
It's every day upon arrival at school.
Thank you.
So you're gonna have to rely on the parents to answer the question about symptoms. I don't know how many 4 and 5-year-olds are gonna understand
Yeah.
that.
Yes, it would have to be, for some, it would have to be parents. We also talked about, some of the schools may be having an agreement that goes home, that there is the screening questionnaire, that goes home and asks the parents that they would be monitoring their child at home before they send them to school to be sure that the child isn't showing any of the symptoms listed. And they actually take the temperature of the student at home before they send them to school. But then also there would be a screening that happens on campus. And that's the state guideline for screening on campus. So the next question would be, what is the recommended protocol for a school or a classroom that is exposed to COVID-19? That is the flow chart that we've been talking about, and I think it's very effective for what steps that Butte County Public Health and the school will take to ensure that if there is an exposure on campus, that we try to contain that exposure to those who were truly just the close contacts of that person with COVID. And I think that if, you guys will all be able to receive a copy of that flow chart once it's finalized and approved. And I think that it's a very good partnership and working document that will help us to achieve that goal.
Monica, this is Dr. Kathleen Kaiser. What I'm seeing is tremendous and sometimes extremely emotionally charged different understandings. Like the training said close contacts were within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. But there are other people who go screaming at individuals that are much further away than that, or just short contact because they didn't have on a mask. So there's a lot of intensity around this that I don't think is well understood. So what would be identified as a quote-unquote close contact?
Well, again, what the parameters that you're using within 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer. And wearing a face covering does help reduce that exposure. But if someone had COVID, you would also want, others to wear eye protection, which isn't really practical for all of us to be doing. So that's why when we look at who was really truly exposed, we don't want to say automatically, oh, it's going to be the whole school or the whole classroom. We want to look at what kind of interaction that employee or that student had with others on campus and try to only quarantine those who are truly close contacts to that case. And there's some good work that's been done this summer on how we could help, schools could help identify who those close contacts were. And one of the things later that's talked about is having students in seating charts so that, we know in a certain classroom who a student was sitting near.
Monica, this is Eileen Robinson again. With the delay time between suspicion of being an active COVID carrier versus the test coming in, back to verify one way or another, being anywhere from 3 to 7 days, is there something in your plan that says what to do in the meantime?
Yes, well, most of the time, if we had a high suspicion that someone was positive because of their symptoms and they were tested, we would probably go ahead and be considering that person to be a positive case, even if their test had not come back yet as positive. And normally we look at symptom onset, and we say for the 2 days before symptom onset is when the infectious period began. This again is why it's so important for schools to be doing daily active monitoring. So hopefully you will not have an employee or a student come to work sick. You may have someone who ended up being asymptomatic and testing positive, but hopefully you're not going to have had a symptomatic person on your campus as a positive case. If someone tests positive who is asymptomatic, their infectious period goes back 2 days before their test.
Thank you.
Okay. And then there were some questions about masking. And, one of the things that we have said, there's been a lot of new requirements coming from the state, as you know, about masking in public places. And we want, as public health, just say, we hope everyone realizes that masking really does enhance protective measures. And the inability to enforce masking shouldn't influence any plans that you might be making for protective measures. They will enhance those measures. And the state, just this week, is coming out with new guidance about enforcement of masking statewide. So we're hoping that the enforcement issue around masking is not really an issue, but rather the issue is how can we all take the measures necessary that also include social distancing, washing hands, staying home when sick, and self-monitoring for symptoms, along with masking to protect one another in our community.
Monica,
There
this
was-
is,
oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, this is Kelly Staley, and I heard you say something that I wanted to clarify. Can you clarify for myself and the board and our viewing public, are masks mandatory? Is that a requirement from the governor in his executive order at this point? I've heard opposing views.
Yes, in public places, masking is a requirement. Initially, when his order came out, he had exempted schools, and then he went back and said that that was not an exemption.
Monica, question is, the Pediatric Association of Doctors has said that children cannot wear a mask for very long without having the issue of rebreathing their own carbon dioxide. I have a former student who works with disabled adults. He said that 2 of his clients couldn't make it walking through Walmart before thinking they were gonna faint and had to sit down. So,
Yes.
I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, My concern is, how would a teacher know that a child was starting to struggle?
Okay, well, the current guidance for the use of face coverings does provide exemptions for children if they're under the age of 2, or for persons with a medical condition, a mental health condition, or a disability that prevents them from wearing a face covering. Usually, people that are sitting at rest in like an office or a classroom setting should not be having any difficulty breathing while they're wearing a face covering. Those general symptoms of any kind of respiratory distress should be quite obvious to the general public. But if there was ever a question of someone having difficulty, they certainly should be evaluated by the school nurse or another medical professional. Of course, if there was ever a question that a person was struggling with wearing a face covering, the face covering should be removed immediately, right? It does not have to be if there is obviously some sort of medical issue happening. And there are alternatives to the standard cloth mask or disposable type of surgical mask, like a face shield with a drape across the bottom allows for there to be that visual that some people might have some issues with, but yet still collects the droplets in the drape that's across the bottom of the face shield. Okay, and I believe that we will be seeing, as I said, more guidance about face coverings coming out from the state this week, or I would think next week at the latest. One of the question was, in your best estimation, how likely are we to see more than one school closure due to exposure between this August and next June? And I would say it's very probable. COVID cases are definitely on the, uprise, not only in our county, but throughout the state. And if there ended up being a mass exposure, I could definitely see a school closure being needed. And I think that this summer, the school education planning group has kind of known that there might be need for at least part of a school closure for some campuses or a total school closure, and have been trying to make arrangements in case that were to happen at their school. Again, in public health, we want to say prevention is everything. So trying to really limit anybody on campus who not only is ill, but if they are in quarantine because they've been exposed in their home or in the community outside of campus, that they would honor that quarantine and not come to school while they're supposed to be in their quarantine period.
Monica, this is Jay Marchand. Have you seen any data that for us as a district that we should be purchasing more of a portable or a disposable face mask versus a cloth mask for our students?
No, I think that, the cloth masks are cloth face coverings are very appropriate for the school setting. If for some reason, you want to have a store of extra cloth face coverings or of disposable surgical masks, whatever is easier for your school to procure and to have, I think that both are very adequate, and whatever works best for your school's procurement process in the long run, either are very useful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Monica, do you know what the number one special need is in schools? It's language.
Mm-hmm.
We have speech specialists that are dealing with every single school. So that's one concern that I think a lot of parents have, that their child, the most common thing that their child might struggle with early on in school is being able to speak clearly and be understood by people around them. So I haven't seen the if you could send us an image. I haven't seen or heard of those at all.
Yes, we've been sharing information about those with some of the principals, and I'd be happy to be able to, help with some of that if we can, so.
And this is Danette, I'll just add that I did just a search engine search this morning by putting in face shields with drapes, and you'll come up with several pictures.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
Okay. Yes, one of the things that people have talked about, not just in the school setting, but teachers, pastors, other people who do a lot of presentations or public speaking are wanting to be able to use a face shield rather than a mask because, seeing their face is so important as part of their occupation. So I think there's more and more of that being made available for the general public. Okay. Another question here. It says, many teachers are concerned about contracting the virus and potentially transmitting it to their high-risk family members. And then how likely would this scenario be? Again, if someone is a contact, that means you were within 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer to a person with COVID, you yourself would be placed in a 14-day quarantine status. And that means even at home, you should be separate from your other family members as much as possible. Sleeping in a separate area, using a separate bathroom or disinfecting the bathroom after you use it, wearing a mask in the house if you're in an area where other family members are. But any time that we have someone who is a contact, we try to give very specific quarantine instructions to them. And if we have come across people that have other high-risk family members in their household, we have tried to help them make accommodations so that high-risk family member is not at risk in their home. I don't see that changing with the opening of school. And then are there steps beyond general hygiene and sanitation that teachers can take to mitigate this risk? Again, using all the different preventive measures that we're talking about wearing the mask, washing your hands, using social distancing, not touching your face, and making sure that you stay home if you're not feeling well, if the students stay home. We're hoping that is really going to help mitigate the risk for all people on campus. And one of the questions was regarding the published draft plans for school reopening, what are your most significant areas of concern? And for me personally, I've said this before in the summer planning meetings, I think the difference between the ease of implementing any mitigation and containment efforts for a primary grade versus a secondary school. I think it will be a lot easier when you have a cohort of students that are with one teacher in one classroom, and that group of students is contained to their own area. I think that will be a lot easier for schools to respond and public health to respond to than students at secondary level school, where they're junior high or high school. They are having several different groups of students and classes in a day with different teachers throughout the day. To me, that's going to be really the largest challenge and concern.
We had a parent who referred to what I believe the image you're talking about with the primary or elementary schools as social bubbles, keeping one classroom together the whole day through school, so that their interaction with other kids in other classrooms would be really, really restricted. Is that kind of the image that you're thinking of?
Yes, kind of the traditional thought of, K through 5, children are in the same classroom with one teacher. Maybe they interact usually with another class for a little project, but they're basically with one teacher for the day in one classroom. That is going to be a much easier situation in case you had a case come up in that classroom. That's going to be a lot easier to contain on your school campus than if you have a junior high student who has 6 periods with 6 different classrooms with 6 different groups of kids, some duplicate, but 6 different teachers, and then maybe they go to lunch with different people every day. It's going to be a lot different for junior high and high school, unless maybe some changes can be made for junior high and high school. So cohorts of students, maybe they take English and history together. For 2 periods, but they're in the same class, and the teacher rotates, but the kids stay in the same classroom. That kind of idea to minimize their ability to move around. So one of the questions, I just answered this personally for me. It said, which model would you select for your own child? And I know this was talking about, on-site learning versus distance learning, maybe versus a combination of the two. And, as a parent of prior Chico Unified School District children, my children are long grown and graduated from college now, but they went all through Chico Unified Schools. I really see the benefits of on-site instruction and the social interaction, but also the desire to decrease the amount of time for potential exposure. So I think that a mix between on-site and distance learning would seem ideal for me if I was a parent and I had a choice to make.
Thank you.
Let's see.
10 should be an easy one for you.
Yes, I think we've already talked about 10.
Yeah.
Should all staff be required to wear masks, even if that interferes with their ability to teach and connect with students? Again, I think earlier we talked there's alternatives to masks or face coverings, such as the face shield with drapes. And I do believe that all teachers should be required to wear some sort of face covering. And hopefully between those 3 different options, there would be something that would be suitable for each and every teacher and staff member, not just teacher, I should say, all staff members. I think we talked about question 11, we kind of talked about it earlier, about medical conditions, etc. And we talked about number 12, we talked about, there would be basic signs of respiratory distress or other health-related factors that could be, outlined for general assessment use, but a school nurse or other medical professional should perform any kind of emergency evaluation needed if you felt a child or staff member was having true difficulty. And again, there is a question about, do some types of facial coverings cause less physical stress? We've talked today about there's many different types of facial coverings, and each individual should determine which one works best for them. We don't, personally at our local public health department, we don't have any guidance or studies that are noting any specific type working better than another. But, we definitely know that, different types can, maybe work better for different people for their own personal reasons. And then there was a question next about if the temperature reading suggests the student should immediately be separated from others, what is considered a safe environment in which to do so until a parent or guardian can arrive to pick up the child? This has been discussed this summer by both the school nurses group and by the planning group. And now, different schools are working to identify areas that students could safely be in isolation until they're picked up from the school. So So I feel really confident that the different schools are identifying those areas that will work for them, and every school is different. So, I'm happy that they're thinking ahead and looking for how that will work for them. And it said, should the school require a medical release form to any non-parent picking up a child to ensure the non-parent is aware of symptoms and associated risks? My thing was, whatever form that you're usually using when a child who is picked up that is ill, if you have a form that I would think that was adequate. And, again, the child should be wearing a face covering when they're at school, and I would assume they should be wearing a face covering as they leave the campus if they're with a non-parent. And then one of our last questions here was, where does the health department see as the future of the stay-at-home order, and will it be lifted, and will things become more restrictive as more cases are identified? And I am going to let Danette answer that question.
Okay, thanks, Monica. So, as most of you are aware, parts of the stay-at-home order has already been lifted, and things continue to change quickly, so we get our guidance from the state, and we follow the state guidance whenever they allow other sectors to open up. We will also have to follow the state guidance if we reach certain metrics or thresholds of metrics. That would require us to close sectors back up somewhat too. So I would encourage everyone involved with the school, including the parents, to really monitor that covid19.ca.gov website and our buttecounty.net/ph website, public health. We will put all the guidances up there as soon as we know. We also release information as quickly as we get it through social media and through media interviews and press releases, things like that. We are, as a county, looking at bringing back our weekly press conference so that we can get information out that way as well. If we reach the point where the state requires us to start shutting sectors back down, we will get that information out in a variety of ways so people will be aware, and we hope that we will even get that out before it actually happens so that businesses and schools can prepare ahead of time.
Jeanette, this is, Eileen Robinson again.
We do expect that will happen. With our increase in cases, we expect that we will be put on the state's monitoring list, which would require some sectors to be closed. We don't know exactly when that would happen, and as of right now, that does not include closing schools.
So Danette, Monica, and I believe Casey Hatcher has joined us now as well. First of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your morning to join us and address our board and our community directly. I also will say that I've had the opportunity to see the preview of the work that the subcommittee has done, and it's excellent. You've done a great job of outlining and making, flow charts easy to see, and I know it's not in final form yet, but really look forward to being able to share that when it is in final form, because I think that will also help explain protocols that are in place both at the county level and then of course at the school site levels as well. The last question that was here was, is it possible to create a video to show students, particularly elementary students, what COVID is and to explain some of the key elements, both to increase awareness but also perhaps decrease fear. And I was wondering if that was possible through the health group, the school's reopening group that was already meeting.
Yeah, so this is Danette again, and I think that we can definitely look at that and see if that's a possibility. I believe it is a possibility regardless, but what we would want to do is look to other resources or other sources to make sure that that has not already been done before we reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, that's
So
smart.
we'll look into that and see what we can find, and if we can't find anything, then we'll consider creating.
I think Dr. Sanjay Gupta with CNN has created such a video.
Yeah, CNN.
Okay, and I will also add that, this summer, one of our public health education specialists named Eunice Lopez had created a basic kind of COVID 101 PowerPoint that she presented twice, once to the BCOE planning group and once to the school nurses group. And they both asked if it could be recorded and made available for teachers and school staff to be able to use in preparation for back to school. And we said absolutely, so we've been working on having that made available. And I know that several of the principals had told me that they were gonna have that be part of the teacher coming back and faculty coming back to school and being prepared. It's about a 10 to 15 minute presentation that we'll work on, and I know that we would be more than happy to, see if there's not something that we feel is really useful for, for the schools, for the elementary school students, we could probably work on something. But I agree with Annette, there's probably, whether it's Sanjay Gupta or someone else, I'm sure that somebody's been working on something for school children already.
And also have it be in Spanish?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we do have Spanish-speaking staff. If for some reason that wasn't available and we needed to do that, we could help make that happen.
that's great. I think that's a great resource.
So, this is Tom Lando. Forgive me if I'm re-asking a question that's already been answered. Do we know when we might be able to see that planning document, when it might be finalized, the flow charts?
Yes, we had taken it to the planning meeting, and what we felt was its final draft last Thursday. And I believe that group is meeting again, tomorrow. Today's already Wednesday. Meeting again tomorrow, and I think it'll become finalized at that meeting.
So it's conceivable we can have it for the public by our meeting next week? Okay, perfect, thank you.
I will also add that the flowchart document we have created is for internal use only by the schools. It is not to be made public to parents or the general public, because it has reporting phone numbers, etc., that we cannot release to the general public. It's truly a working document for use between school staff and Butte County Public Health. We do add a couple of resources on the bottom that, can be shared with parents, but those phone numbers that are involved or included in the worksheet are truly to enhance direct communication from the schools to our public health staff who are working on the COVID case investigation and response.
Understood, thank you.
And Monica, I completely understand that. I would ask if there are portions of that, because for me, it was very helpful to understand the different roles. And I believe you had different colored boxes that showed the role of public health and then the role of local education. And that streamlined flow chart, I think, would make a lot of us feel more at ease, especially parents and staff members. So if there would be a possibility of doing a more generic version, that would be great.
Yeah, we're working on a little, what we call a cheat sheet, that's a little bit smoother, like a one-page
Right.
cheat sheet.
That'd be
And
great.
I think we could do something like that that could be communicated to your families. It would not have as much detail as the
Correct.
case, response, but yeah, I think that we could adapt it for something that could be distributed to your family.
Completely understand the details and the confidentiality of phone numbers. And frankly, within that document, certain items will be different from district to district. Some will need to be negotiated. But the general flow chart was just outstanding.
Monica, this is Eileen Robinson again. One question that I had that I don't remember being answered this morning is when we identify a potential or verified COVID case, who is responsible for the contact tracing part of the mitigation measures? Is that Butte County Health, or is that the school district where the case has occurred?
That's an excellent question. It's actually a combined response between public health and the schools, because unlike our normal contact tracing, where we call the case and we find out who they've been in close contact with, and then we call those close contacts, as you said earlier, a 5-year-old is not going to be able to tell me who they were in close contact with when they were at school. So we are going to be relying on the schools to help us gather information about close contacts, and they will be part of the team. The school and public health will work together to identify those that we feel we may need to have in quarantine. We'll probably make specific calls to different people to be sure that they are close contacts, and there will be messaging that goes to those contacts from public health and from the school.
Again, on this issue, who makes the call as to whether or not quarantine is recommended, or is it a mandate?
Public health makes the determination of who should be in isolation. That's isolation is for the ill, so isolation is for the person who actually is diagnosed with COVID, and quarantine is for close contact. So in both instances, public health has the responsibility for determining who falls in those categories, and we also have the authority to be sure that people are in isolation and quarantine. At this point, we in public health are not issuing individual isolation or quarantine orders unless we believe that someone may be disregarding them and it puts the public at risk. So we provide education about their status and whether they need to be in isolation or in quarantine, and we provide that oversight. We are also the ones with the authority to lift the isolation or the quarantine, and part of our flow chart is being sure that we're communicating with the school if there's a question about whether or not someone should be in quarantine any longer or in isolation, and when that's lifted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have gotten concerning questions about the financial impact of someone being quarantined. And so I don't really have an answer for that. That's, to my knowledge, the state isn't funding that person for having to stay home.
So that is something that we're working through with the union. There are some guidelines on the state level that we're following, and then further discussions with our union. My understanding, I hesitate to even say this because Jim's not here to correct me if I am wrong, but my understanding is currently if you are put in quarantine for 2 weeks, you continue to receive your pay, and that does not get your sick leave in Chico Unified.
But the parents are also raising this question.
That I cannot answer.
I know, I can't answer it either, I have no idea. So is there any fiscal aspect of this that the county deals with?
There's a lot of guidance for individuals that is available right now on the state website, and is available through calling our COVID call center from the county or from calling 211, that gives particular information to individuals if resources available for them for pay while they're on quarantine, or they're unemployed because of being, testing positive. So I would definitely, steer families, with those questions to, that guidance.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any
One
other
of the
questions?
things too to remember is just because someone is a staff person is on quarantine or a student is on quarantine, doesn't mean they can't work or go to school remotely. And I think the benefit of you having done distance learning, last spring, if a classroom did need to be in quarantine or a school or part of a school, you have distance learning, availability. And, as long as someone is not very, very ill, if they're just in quarantine, they may very well be able to work remotely, or a student to have distance learning and not lose ground. Remember, it might not be a whole classroom. You might have someone who was, exposed outside of work or outside of school, and now they need to stay home, but the rest of the class is fine. So I think we kind of keep thinking about it as all black and white, but there will be a lot of nuances, Little Johnny might be exposed at, his, cousin's birthday party, has nothing to do with the school. But if we can keep him in quarantine and he can keep distance learning while, the rest of the classmates are there safe and protected, that's gonna protect everyone from being exposed to him while he's in quarantine.
All right, any other questions for our officials from Butte County Public Health?
Well, I just want to confirm, hi, this is Liz Griffin. I just want to confirm that your recommendation, and I thought you stated it pretty clearly, is you still believe that the children should be wearing masks?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's the area we've gotten the most resistance, I think, from parents. And then also, I'm not sure, is that the one also that the pediatric
Yes.
Yeah,
recommendation is not to?
Correct.
So that's, that's one of those things that, when it's controversial like that, and people are getting mixed messages, that's a
Well,
difficult situation.
We're the local public health department, and we follow guidance from the California Department of Public Health. I recognize the American Academy of Pediatrics and others, but right now we're the local health jurisdiction. And so we are really trying to follow the guidance coming out from the state, California Department of Public Health, and I know you also from the California Department of Education. So I think there will continue to be, differing, opinions and announcements about this, as there has been all along. As Jeanette said earlier, the one thing that is evolving and changing is COVID. But in other countries around the world, if you look at countries like Japan and others where they have dealt with SARS and MERS and other coronavirus type diseases, children attend school en masse. Their whole community lives in face covering. And I think it's just something for us to remember that this has been done successfully in other parts of the world.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the clarification.
So Monica, Danette, and Casey, I have a question that I think I know the answer to, and it's regarding public gatherings in our current environment where we are right now. We have a big decision obviously in front of us when we talk about what school will look like next year. Our plan was to hold a meeting at the Center for the Arts using social distancing and hand sanitization, but allow the public to attend. But my understanding is, and I just need clarification on this, is that at this point, we are prohibited from having large group meetings inside a stadium, inside a auditorium, convention type center. Could you add some clarification to that?
Yeah, this is Danette, and you're correct. Under the state mandate right now, there are no gatherings allowed. whether it's large or small. No gatherings allowed.
Okay, it's a difficult one for us because we clearly want to hear from, the board needs to hear from their constituents, we wanna hear from your parents, staff, and students, but that clarifies, we need to continue to do it in the manner that we are, so thank you.
Yeah, anything that you can continue to do virtually is highly recommended.
Any other questions?
I have a question from the chat. This is Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
From Camille Upton, a teacher at Chico High. Question, is if someone is exposed outside of school and in quarantine, will the school be notified?
If someone is in quarantine outside of school, we usually, well, outside of an employer, we usually do not notify employers if someone is in quarantine. We do try to work with employers if someone has tested positive. Now, in certain situations, if we believe that we know right away that someone is not gonna be compliant, they tell us they don't believe in this, it's all a bunch of hokey, and they aren't gonna quarantine, and, then we would look at that as a potential threat to public health and safety, and we would probably then notify their employer.
What about in the case of students where we are not their employer?
We would look at the student situation as the same as an employer, where they would, basically, if we knew that someone was gonna go into a public setting and be in close contact with others on a regular basis and put those others at risk, we would probably try to work that through and step in if we needed to do that, yes.
Thank you.
As I said earlier, we can actually issue quarantine orders under our health officer if that's needed. We haven't needed to do that yet with quarantine, but if we thought we needed to, we would.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I again want to thank you for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate your partnership and your expertise.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice to meet with you. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Okay, so with that, we turn it back
Right.
over to Ed Services, or is there a?
Let me just ask if anybody needs a break.
Yes.
To just run to the restroom. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Okay, some people might need to use the restroom.
Space yourselves using the restroom.
Yeah.
There are two though.
There are two.
I know, but
Yeah, okay. Formal recess for 5 minutes.
Also, before we get started on this next one, this morning, it's not on our slides, Kevin Moretti gave us today some teacher feedback for you guys to look at too. I just want to make sure you guys know, I don't want to think that we were not covering it. But we just got it today, it wasn't part of our slideshow, so you'll have that to look before the next board meeting also, to look at what the teachers are saying.
Well, that's really important too,
Yes.
because that
So-
really voices a lot of concerns
Concerns and
on
what
the
they're
part of
feeling.
the teachers about their own safety in coming back. And, yeah, I was a little surprised at just how concerned,
Some of them were.
some of them are. And, I realize that this isn't a huge sample, right? Because
It's not.
It's about half the teachers, you think?
about half, so you have to keep that in mind as well. But, yeah, I think everybody should definitely digest that.
All right, so we're gonna kind of just show you again, some of the feedback and discussion. So this is some of the feedback that we got on the safety protocols, from the community, staff, also that sent in, we kind of broke them down. Some were repetitive, so these are the main feedback that they gave us on the safety protocols. I'm just trying to get there on those.
Where is that one
It's
at?
right at the beginning of our slides.
At the beginning?
No, it's
No,
further in,
page
it's
16, I believe.
Oh,
about
I
slide
was
16.
looking at the screen. Jay,
Yes.
there are no page numbers.
There's no page numbers, so it's going to be the third one after we started with the model feedback and discussion. So the first page
What's
was
the heading?
The safety guidelines.
safety
It looks
exactly
exactly like it is up
on
there.
the screen.
Except there's only a few of the
Yeah,
bullet points.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because there's only two.
Yeah, sorry,
Oh.
that's been changed, sorry, so it's, looks differently on there?
Yeah, there were two versions, there were not two versions, there were two copies, and we were merging the two, and so we wanted to be sure that, this morning we had everything in there for the
Oh, okay.
So,
board meeting, but the packets were printed prior to
Okay.
us merging.
so we'll give you the updated one.
So Jay, right off the bat, the community is divided, but, and I had people texting me saying, it's not a law, and you're like,
Right.
oh my God, I don't want a confrontation with parents, but very strongly stated by our health experts that everyone will wear a mask at this point. So I think I thought we got a lot of stuff from the health people, but that seemed to be the most upfront statement. Yeah.
But looking at the pediatric, I just looked that up, and at least the little blurb we got about what's going on in California, and they were talking about the face mask, but they did mention developmentally with the younger children, how that may not be feasible or may not even be warranted with the little ones, preschool, kindergarten.
The problem is, I think, with them setting 2-year-olds, that's a stupid thing, because none of our kids would be the 2-year-old group, although we have, Ted, you have the preschool.
We actually opened preschool and they're wearing masks.
They are wearing masks,
Kathleen said
okay.
it has gone interestingly so far. They're limited to 10. She said it's been okay, all the parents knew ahead of time, they kind of knew what they were opting into, and she said challenges, but it's not been a disaster yet with it, so.
I think it will be really interesting if we can do more research about a greater range of what kind of face shields that we might find
Well,
available.
that's a good testing ground too.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
to gather information from the teachers about, what challenges are they facing?
Before the next meeting, I'll definitely check in with Kathleen and kind of share with you what she's
Yeah,
saying, what
so,
she's seeing happen.
what do they recommend, and
And the face shields may be less inhibiting for some kids. You can almost
Yeah.
make it like a, dress up.
yeah, that's a
Sure
great
she
idea.
has.
You look like Darth Vader, like Kathy,
Yeah.
right?
They had the nurses do some kind of front-loading lessons for the kids, and kind of, so they kind of knew what was happening also, the kids did also. So they did a good job prepping them. This is what you're gonna be doing when you're here, kind of thing.
There'll be a lot more training before it's how to line up, how to sit down. We'll be training on your face mask.
Yep.
Wiping your hands off or washing your hands, hand sanitizer as you walk in, those types of things. Eileen?
Yeah, I don't know what the plan was for discussing different things on the bullet points and things, because I have some things I wanna say.
Right.
It is your workshop and you guys jump in and talk with
Do you want,
talk.
should we allow Jay to go through these, or should we address them
We
as
can
they
address
come
each
up?
slide if you want, if you go.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
no, I mean, all those bullets that we.
I don't really wanna read, but some of them, as you can see, the health department's already answered for us.
Yeah.
How will we know, what's the protocol, what's gonna happen if somebody is tested positive, we'll have a flow chart obviously to follow. They will have hopefully a cheat sheet that we can give out to our community on that information. We are looking at different ways for the lunch, how's lunch is gonna look like, how's recess is gonna look like. Are we sending them out in a class, only their cohort class can be in certain areas, or cohort classes are going in to get their lunch? We're still working out those details, obviously, with food and nutrition. How will it look like? What we're finding out too, and even in camps, keeping kids apart when they're waiting for that to start, so before school starts, what does that look like to get kids into their classrooms? To keep them socially distancing, that was some of the safety protocols that they're asking for. We're gonna have to definitely look at that, talk with maintenance and operation, and try to figure out what we're gonna do that. We know we have gotten 4,000 of the social distancing stickers or things to put on the ground donated to us. I believe it was Lowe's. Lowe's gave us 4,000 of those for our schools, for our hallways, so we'll be starting to do things like that. But some of these questions that they're asking, we have not gone through all of it. For how are we gonna have one-way hallways and stuff like that, because some of that we're gonna have to discuss with you guys and with our principals and everybody, and what would that look like on our campuses.
Many of these you'll see later in the schedules. I would say almost all of these are represented in the pros and cons later when we get to the descriptions of the schedules and the pros and cons of those.
I'm coming from a little bit different place as a
Sure.
board member. This is me putting out there where my head is in considering all of the input that we're coming. What's the bottom line for me as a board member? And the first, the bullet that talks about the community is definitely divided about the state mandate to wear face coverings. I get that. I absolutely get that. And if there was a way that I could see that we could make everybody happy and open school, I know exactly where I'd be. My issue is, we can't make everybody happy and open school. And for me, the number one priority is open school. Now, how opening school looks, that's a different issue. If opening school means, because of the guidance that we've gotten from the health department, because of all of the things we've learned, means some kind of face covering for our staff and our students and all of these other things with social distancing, then that's what we do. My opinion, I'm just speaking for me. But I believe that we have made such a tremendous effort to accommodate those parents that do not want their kids subjected to masking, to give them the option of distance learning, the online stuff. I don't like that. I don't think that's what our kids need. But if a parent says, I'm sorry, but you're not putting a mask on my child, then that's their choice. But I want our kids seeing their teacher, whether it's through a face shield, a mask, in person. And in person has now changed as far as the definition of in person. Because in person sometimes is in the classroom, and other times it's going to be on Zoom or some other, modification. It's because we can't get everybody into those school sites at the same time. We have to split the numbers in order to make it work. So, I just want to let my fellow board members know that my position is, the most important thing is opening school with as much had to do it the way we did it in just those few days, but gosh, we're probably facing another full year of not being able to be out in public without our masks and, so let's hug our kids.
Well, that's, I think probably everybody would agree that that's really what we're trying to do, where we're not gonna be able to please everybody,
Right.
but at least there's an option for everybody. If you have great concerns, you can go down this road. If your priority is to get your kid back in school and engaged as much as possible with the personal process of, learning with a teacher and other students and the socialization, you can choose that path, and then you've got the middle path where, so, we've done as much as we can to try to have something for everyone. And I'm sure just like the rest of you, I've been reading the vast assortment of emails where some people are off on this direction and they're just like way out in that field, and some people are way out in this field, and we're not going to be able to accommodate everybody.
Right.
So, some of the teachers have said, just don't even try to open regular classrooms and do everything online from the get-go. And then when we get the clear signal that everything is okay, or we've got some sort of immunization type of thing, then we can move forward. Well, but that, then the pediatricians say, and common sense tells you, that would be very harmful to children to be all that time away from contact with one another and missing, their educational purposes. So,
And then if we're talking in the here and now with the current guidelines that we have, and as we all know, it can change at any time. So with that mask issue, which is so divisive, perhaps we can encourage parents to contact the state legislatures, the superintendent of instruction and our governor, and let them know their views.
I think the decisions that will get made will be driven by health knowledge and not by parent preference. And the other part of this, and I really hesitate to say this, but if you watch the CNN special on bats, they have spent the last 20 years trying to figure out how bats get exposed to so many viruses and don't get them. But the more transmissions we are seeing is from animals to humans, and the alteration of the virus by being in humans, and then it transitions in different formats. So I don't know that there will be a perfect health answer. Very few immunizations have been developed in less than a year. Very, very few. But I do think that the other data that all of us as parents and grandparents have seen is children need social interaction.
they learn through that. That's their method of learning, and is largely through play too, which is, the contact and just play is that, and that's what's so dangerous, because they're using, kids and the toys and sharing and mouths and everything goes all over it, and, it is difficult to say, oh, we're gonna cut that all out, because that is developmentally that's necessary.
On that note, I know there have been some teachers who have commented about online learning, and you have to understand, teachers understand, deeply how important it is for the kids to be in the classroom. No one is saying that lightly. I think teachers have an absolute right to advocate tremendously for their own health. A lot of them are legitimately worried about the outcome of this disease. So no one is saying that lightly, and certainly not. I think they want, because they want to be home or anything. This is I like a lot of the data that we just got, in fact, from Kevin, because a lot of the data from the union mirrors the things that health department told us and that we already had in place in terms of the really common sense daily safety checks. I think once we understand all the stakeholders and we're all on the same page, basically, with reducing the amount of close contact, and daily sanitation and daily check-ins, we can still find a way to make this happen. But I certainly don't want to dismiss the concerns teachers have of going out. I mean,
Absolutely, and I think that's the
Makes
bigger
me
issue
terrified.
too, just like with the healthcare professionals who've been providing, assistance to all these people who have had it. How many of them have actually got it? And so it's not an insignificant, consideration, and considering, 90% of whatever all our resources go to supporting the teachers, and they're the ones who make this all happen. But along that same line, what I'm feeling very strongly right now is that instead of it just being a possibility that we make sure all the teachers have had professional development on the resources that we're using, Edgenuity and the Wonders and the
Toolbox,
yeah,
No.
that not be just maybe, that be absolutely, because really from what, Monica was saying, there's a real possibility that we may be shut down, or a school may be shut down, and then it'll be a necessity for all the teachers to be prepared to switch over to that. And I think one of the greatest criticisms that we had from, the period of time at the end of last semester, the end of the year, was, well, you weren't prepared, and, people were giving out these half-baked lessons or whatever. Well, obviously the teachers were really struggling and doing the best they could to come up with the most effective things that they could, but it certainly wasn't as good as having consistent, well-planned, well-put-together curriculum that everybody is consistently using, and that, say, heaven forbid you have to jump into that, partway into the semester, you can do that. They should at least have the exposure so they know and they're able to feel comfortable jumping into that curriculum. Because it may, it
As part of our
absolutely may be
back to school
necessary.
staff development day,
Yes.
correct?
Okay, so I've taught online at the university level for a long time. I also, because I had an operation, I had to do the feedback survey for 2 weeks before, and do the temperatures and do all the detailed stuff. It is a two-way street. It's also a three-way street depending on the age. The parent at the home has to have the capacity to engage in the other parts of this. And many of them have said, I think extremely honestly, they can't. They can't because of their work schedule, they can't because of their own background, they can't do it. It may just be an emotional stress for them. So you have multiple kids at different levels who would have had 3 teachers and there's just one parent, So that parent is just like, oh my God. And so I think one of the other consequences we face, and I'll dispute a little bit, Liz, that we were more prepared than the university was in our SWIFT. We had the 1-to-1 ratio, all of the things. So what did the top law schools do in the country? They sent them home and they held them. There was no default. It was credit, no credit. We had grad schools all over the country doing that. We had universities doing that because they realized that the students couldn't equally access, even though they were university students, could not equally access the resources. We're talking about 5-year-olds starting kindergarten. We're talking about high school kids, missing their sport team and coming back. There's a huge range of capacity there for the people to participate online. I think we may have to do it. Certainly we make the resource available, but I would say had we given any kind of standardized test, we would have seen a huge deficit. Huge. My 7-year-old doesn't remember the words he learned at the beginning of 1st grade and he's going into 2nd grade. Not because it's just because of exposure and practice and what's critical. So I very, very strongly believe that we need to start school with at least the chance to meet your teacher, get to understand your teacher, get to have some sense of what school is about. And she responded very well to the idea of the bubble classroom that one of my fellow sociologists had presented, which is the more we can keep kids contained together and not randomly, because go back, I was really, really specific about the question, I was really waiting, it's 6 feet less and more than 15 minutes. People don't want to hear that because they want to go, exposed. No, you're not exposed. Has to be within 6 feet and more than 15 minutes. That's how they do contact tracing. That is the health mandate. So I think we need to help people lower their concerns a little bit and then do everything we can to arrange that. Kind of, and I'm jumping here, but for me it kind of looks like the AM/PM model for elementary school might be the most livable of that because they see their teachers every day for a shorter period of time in a smaller class setting.
I agree with you.
You
What
got
does
kids
do
that
for
age.
working families?
What would you say?
So I'm gonna jump in
Yeah,
for just a
let's-
second on, just a protocol. You know, in a board workshop, obviously, this is the opportunity for the board to discuss amongst themselves and then open it up to, input. And I just wanted to do a reminder, we did ask teachers to log in, so we have some teachers readily accessible on Zoom. So by no means do I wanna cut off your discussion, I just want you to be aware that they're there. And if you wanna ask them some questions, please feel free to do that, and you can do it at the end of your discussion, as is typically our procedure, or you can be interactive, whatever works best with the conversation. Yes.
What Kathy and Linda were just exchanging was my question too, is do the teachers prefer, frequent, no day off between their contact with their kids versus a longer contact and then a break and a longer contact? I'd like to know I saw the survey, but, I'd like to hear some dialogue.
Okay, well, now is the opportunity for our teachers then, in that case, to jump in. And I think Camille has her hand raised, if I'm reading the screen right.
You're right.
Hi everyone, thank you for allowing us to be here today, first of all. I'm a secondary teacher at Chico High, math, and I'm also a parent of an elementary and a secondary student. So I see it from kind of both perspectives. In terms of your question, I definitely feel that a day-to-day consistency is important for both kids and teachers. I think it's really important that parents, as well as everybody else, understand that even if we did an alternating day schedule, on the off days, that's still school. So parents would still need to support their kids in doing learning on the off days. And I think that's something that maybe wasn't quite understood maybe when the survey was taken. But personally, from my opinion as a mother and as an educator, I really want that consistency for my kids. And I want to be able to connect with them every day, even if it's for a shorter period of time, which also poses the discussion with the masks. Shorter period of time for my third grader and my high schooler in the morning or in the afternoon in masks definitely feels less daunting than a 6-hour day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Camille.
My name is Marissa Lopez, and I am a fourth grade teacher at Rosedale Elementary, and I would have to agree that meeting with students every day for a shorter period of time would be best. However, my concern would be for parents, and as a parent myself, the transportation. And I have two daughters that would be at Chico Junior, and my question would be, are they going to have the same schedule? Would they both be able to have AM? Would they both be able to believe that the AM PM model would be best, so that we are able to see our students every single day and we could address their needs and be able to have interventions when needed. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Marisol.
you.
Bart?
Bart?
Bart Pennick?
Hi there, Bart Panic from Little Chico Creek, third grade teacher. Benefits to both models, but I think as an educator, I would prefer to meet with students every day if I can for those shorter periods. So the AM/PM model would be best. I just think if you're looking at math and reading instruction in particular with teaching time, you need that consistent, ongoing, daily practice with students in order for them to retain the skills that you want them to retain. Every other day, you're going to be doing a little bit of catch-up. Those off times, that's a significant amount of student time away from support, I think, during those off days. And so they may get what we want them to practice done, they may not. I just think overall, especially when you look at a finite number of days in a year of our 180, being able to meet with kids as many of those days as possible is the best way for us to go.
Thanks, Bart.
Thank you.
I'm looking for hands
Yeah,
raised
put
on
your
the
hands
Zoom.
down if you spoke. Well, Camille still has hers up.
There we go.
Thank you, thank you.
You can scroll on down.
Anybody new?
Priscilla
Priscilla.
Ernst. There we go.
Priscilla, you're up.
We will trudge ahead with whichever plan, and know that, your staff is gonna be dedicated. CTE has its own set of challenges. There is no amount of ingenuity that will replace hands-on applied equipment instruction in courses like welding and AME and mine and ag. You're not gonna have a replacement value. So hands-on instruction, a challenge in a shorter time is of course labs, and I think science would concur with us as well, that'll bring a challenge, but, we'll get through it. We do have special challenges in distancing and career tech ed, in many courses because kids are off and moving. And so we'll need to employ a lot of policy. We'll also need board direction in all of our work-based learning contracts. Last year, we had as many as 550 work-based learning contracts. So working with our local industry, and I think some of those may be challenging and may require even some, rethinking about how we interface with business and industry during this time. So that's fine.
Thank you, Priscilla. Great points. Hollis?
Hollis, you're up.
Okay, so as a middle school teacher, the plan that I think, and an English middle school teacher, I think the plan that really speaks to me and to the colleagues that I've been able to talk to is one also where we see students, where kids are going to school every day. Now, at middle school, that doesn't mean I will see them, but every student will be seeing some of their teachers every single day. And I just feel strongly that sort of mimics most closely where we used to be and where we hope to one day be again, so that if we get to a place where we can go back to school full time, these kids are in the habit of getting up every day, brushing their teeth, washing their face, putting on school clothes, and going to school. And I think that that's really important. I think that also has real world ramifications. That's what the real world expects of kids, and we want to start teaching that as soon as possible. And I also found in our distance learning in the spring, kids left to their own devices for 6-8 hours a day at home. So little seems to have been accomplished.
You think?
I'm sorry.
We're agreeing with you.
We're agreeing, yeah, we're agreeing with you.
Yeah, so I think this idea that even if I'm an AM student or let's say I'm a PM student, I know that I'm going to school today, and therefore I feel like then they're more likely to spend some time on that day when they're at home on their own working versus, I don't have school at all today. So I just feel like that every day, plus if
Holly.
Thank you, Hollis.
Thanks.
You bet.
Kevin Moretti?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about the model, just a couple of points that regarding the survey. So, we had, it's only been open since Monday at noon. We did get half our members to respond, so a comment was made, it was a pretty small sample, and I would argue that half of the membership is actually a pretty large sample. It's a larger sample than you got from your parents that you're going to use to make decisions. And I really want to point out question 8. So here is, I know this discussion about if we want to blend a model, what's the best model, but I also want to reiterate what I think I heard Tom Lando say, and Tom, it's kind of hard for all of us to hear you, you have a deep, low voice towards where you're sitting, but that safety is a huge concern with a lot of our teachers. So in number 8 on that survey, 38% said they want to go back to a regular, 6-period day, whatnot. 42% are asking for a blended model, and 20% want to start online. And I did give you guys the comments because some of them have personalized information in them, but people are really concerned health-wise. That was the general gist, and they don't see that being part of the conversation at the school board. It's what's best for parents, it's what's going to work best for kids, it's those kind of models. But there's a lot of anxiety out there, and there's going to, I'll tell you what you can do to eliminate it. But I just want you to be aware that there's a considerable amount of anxiety among at least, a good portion of the staff regarding their health.
Kevin, every single pattern starts with our safety guidelines. Every single one. And the health people were here for an hour.
That I got from the teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's why we did get the health department involved.
Yeah.
We got some very good feedback from them as to some, health guidelines. I found that beneficial. But I agree with you, Kevin, those are the comments I'm hearing as well.
So, again, there's anxiety out there, I'm not saying that's rational, or
absolutely.
justified, or logical, it exists. It would be in the best interest of everyone to address it, over and over and over.
Kevin,
Agree.
this is Eileen. I absolutely agree with you. The anxiety is warranted. Any of us that go out in public, even now that masks are mandated, we see that there's not full community buy-in, and that makes it harder for us to keep our people safe at school, because the community has to have a huge buy-in to support school opening. And that means no matter who you are or where you are, you put your mask on, and when you go out in public and slow the spread. I mean, it's the only thing that does, that we have an option for. So I get it as far as the anxiety, and for me, as a board member, I absolutely support anything we can do that's going to keep our people safe.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for putting this survey out. to the
Yeah.
staff.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it.
I might walk by your fence too.
Again, we were,
We have one more, sorry.
Alright, go ahead.
Gail?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, hi, so from the special ed perspective that, and I don't wanna take away from students that don't have disabilities, however, students in special ed are in special ed because they need so much more. More accommodations, more modifications, more checking for understanding, front loading and scaffolding, and that's just, based on just the last, 3 months or 4 months of school, that is really impossible to do in an online learning model. Those kids, I believe, and I think that my buddy teachers within my program at PD believe, those kids need to be at school, and they need to get that social interaction as well. So that's just from my special ed perspective.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, not seeing any other hand raised, I'm gonna turn it back to the board for.
Okay, so at what point are we at now, and what are we expected to come up with right today?
I think today was just discussion for the board to ask questions, to better understand the models. I might ask Kevin Moretti to jump in, if you don't mind, Kevin, because we did have a question about negotiation and, you know, what it would take. Obviously, we don't need to negotiate if we're going back in a traditional 6-period day, elementary regular schedule, because we have language. There certainly will be some COVID-specific things we would need to negotiate. But Kevin, can you talk a little bit about what a process might look like? And you might not know either, but if we were to transition to a different, one of the options.
Yeah, so I can tell you just what's rattling around in my head. So let's, pick option whatever, we'll have to negotiate, you know, hours, class size, things like that. And then what I talked through when we spoke last was making it a very short MOU. So one thing, it would be and this is coming from CTA, we do something like this, and as well as a safety MOU, that it will need to be voted on by the membership. So we're purchasing an online voting, whatever, you know, website, whatever it is, so we can do it that way safely and let us get our membership to vote on. But as far as anything regarding the schedule, I think it should be like a 2-week or a 4-week MOU with an automatic reopener, because how can we knock that stuff off?
Yeah.
And I don't want either of us committing to something for the year because we didn't think of X, Y, Z.
Good point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a good point.
And Kevin, I think it was Charlie, I think it was on one of our Monday meetings, that we didn't do a very good job at services putting out the safety protocols and guidelines that we were looking at and doing on their campuses. They didn't know that we had the hand sanitizers being put in every classroom, that we were ordering the stations, so on our most used spots.
The custodial side.
This custodial side of what we're doing, ordering the different shields for every teacher's, thermometers, and ordering masks for students and everything that we did. So we did send that back out. We're hoping some of that anxiety that some of the teachers are feeling that we're not. Looking at their safety too, we didn't do a very good job of conveying what some of the things that we're looking at, and we will continue by looking at your guys' survey and their concerns.
So, and I'll go back and just keep sending it out. Regarding that, the two most common areas of feedback, one, people are concerned that there aren't enough custodial staff to do what's required. And I know you had the gentleman in that room doing the presentation of the different colored buckets and whatever. I don't know if it's possible to record that and send it out. So that was a big concern regarding just staff. Will you have the staff to get that completed? And I think you believe you will. And then the whole sick leave thing that Kelly did address, I think we need to send out. People are worried that if they get quarantined, they're gonna lose all their sick leave. That's another issue that
I agree.
is driving a lot of anxiety.
Right.
I think we have at least a partial answer for it, but we need to get that out. So we just need to communicate over and over, repeatedly addressing some of these concerns to at least try to lower the anxiety.
And one of the things that we've done, Jim Hanlon sent out, there was a lot of questions that came into him. He sent out answers to the ones that he could address. We need to continue that, keep those posted in our staff room, so there's a frequently asked questions so that people have a resource to go to. But again, you know, please keep communicating with Kevin, because Kevin relays that. Keep communicating with me or any of the Ed Services team or board members. I do read them all.
Hey, Kelly.
Kevin, I would also say I'm interacting pretty consistently with teachers from other districts. And, you know, many of these concerns are the same, and they're not getting as much information as we're getting. So I think, you know, for you to send out the survey, we want to have it known that we are trying to get as much information as we can.
Well, and just a plug for Facebook Live, we're going to do another Facebook Live with our custodian and go over that information. So there'll be an opportunity to put that on our website as well once we do it and ask any questions live. And we'll show that custodial new setup that we're going to be purchasing and using. So we'll try and get that information pushed out in the next few weeks when we do the Facebook Live.
He wants a badge that says starring Kevin.
The other concern that has come up is from, and I think it's coming from the 20% that wanna start online. One was that if the decision was made to go online, they'd have the rest of the summer to plan for that, as opposed to not, I think Jay addressed that there will be some trainings, but people, so that's been one, again, that's 20% of the members that answered that survey. And the other piece is, that's coming from these folks is, we went to online, but we only had 17 cases in Butte County. Now we have much more than that, and yet it doesn't seem to be a consideration. And so that's causing some anxiety among those folks.
Well, to clarify though, we went to online and completely shut down when that was a executive order from the governor.
Good point. So it's a question for the governor.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin, appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Jay, do you want to just really quickly, so we have pros and cons for each of the elementary models and then each of the secondary models. I don't know how much the board wants to go into those today, but they're just and we do have them in buckets, just different, the buckets aren't the same for each of the models because there weren't some exact similarities, but we try to divide the pros and cons for each of the models.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. One of the things in my notes when the health department people were speaking, and they were talking about getting everybody into the school at the beginning of the day, and I all of a sudden went, okay, that funnels everybody into one access point with 6-foot social distancing. How long is that line, and who's gonna do that? Do we have 10 lines of 30, or do we have 5 lines of, do the math?
Remember, half the population.
Yeah.
No,
Half, because we're AM/PM thank you, Kathy.
And I want to interject too, bringing up Kathy's point again. If, because I haven't seen this research, but if it's 6 feet and 15 minutes.
It is.
Then the ingress and egress isn't as much of an issue because kids aren't together coming through there for 15 minutes.
That is the data, that is what they are training the contact tracers. That's why I asked it.
Yeah, so I think that's I didn't know that until this morning. That's a significant piece of that ingress and egress, and even for secondary anyway, in between class grade passing periods.
Correct.
That's a huge statistic that I hadn't heard before.
So you owe me and Kelly owes me, so.
Kathy, I'm so far in debt at this point.
As far as discussing the pros and the cons, I think that bringing up the idea that, embedded in this are the actual illustrations of the models.
Right.
I think we would all be better able to digest this information once we get a clear concept and say, okay, look at this model through, an actual example of what that would look like, what that would feel like, and then, we can readily evaluate the pros and the cons from what you've written.
Sure.
But as far as myself, I want to have that exposure first. I think it would be kind of pointless for me to look at these things right now because I already went over all this in preparation for this.
Right.
But it wasn't as clear and it wasn't as meaningful because I didn't feel what that would be like to be in that schedule. But one thing I do want to bring up, and I don't know if this is something that didn't occur, as far as I recall that was in there, is the one Hollis brought up, okay, so my my elementary student is on the AM PM schedule. So I've got him or her in that schedule, and if the high schooler or junior high schooler were in an AM PM schedule, then, you know, I could coordinate all my kids. But if you've got one kid here and one kid here, and then how do you arrange for the care for them when they're not in school, and that's just like a nightmare. So is there any way to coordinate that, where if you've got a family that's got children in different, you know, levels, secondary and elementary, can we coordinate that to help them?
Clearly, if we go to, and again, that's where our discussion, if we go AM, PM on both models, that was something our registrars now and our administrators would be saying, okay, we have a family that's saying they have AM and they wanna go AM. Some might have, if they have a high school kid that's PM, because they can take the child to class, you know, so we would have to put out a survey, if we're going to this AM, PM models, would you want your children to match up if we can make that happen? We're going to make, you know, we would have prioritized that, or would you want them separate, because you can have them drive, so.
And it won't be ideal for everyone, I'm just gonna say that, because we can't even, in a 6-period day, allow a high school kid to take every single class they wanna take, sometimes there's schedule conflicts.
Well, I don't think we wanna write checks we can't cash, I don't think we'd be able to allow parents to choose, because we have to figure out a way to separate 2,000 kids at Chico High, 2,000 kids at PV, you know, we have to, we just need to be really careful with, yes, we might be able to have both of your kids on AM.
We'll do our best.
But we're not gonna be
But
allowed.
even having a mechanism where we can try to make them happen.
Yes, correct.
And I'm sure with, you know, computers and things like, you know, programs, you could somehow that would work.
There's a siblings lookup in Aries, and
Yeah.
it pulls up the siblings and.
Right, to try to do that, and then the other thing is also with what Monica was talking about is, you know, in junior high and even in high school, and I don't even know if this is possible to do, but I would think it would be easier in junior high school, because there's probably a lot more classes that are absolutely required that all students have to take. But, you know, have these modules where, you know, you've got this group of students and they're all taking these classes together, almost like they were in elementary school, and the teachers come in and out, and that's what somebody had mentioned.
Yeah, the bubble.
How can we, increase the possibilities of having like a bubble like that, where you've got, if we're required to do this, minimizing the flow of students all around the campus and in different groups, but having the teachers be the flower in and out, because that way the teachers are exposed to fewer, and the students are exposed to fewer potential, you know, hazards or opportunities to get this. And it all sounds, you know, very complex, but, I mean, those are the kind of challenges.
Guys, I'm sorry, but I had a family commitment and we were supposed to be done by noon, so,
Grab a sandwich.
yeah.
But I think this is, you know, as far as where we're gonna go from here, we can continue to talk about this, but as far as what's gonna get us to the point of coming to some sort of conclusion is what I'm wondering. You know, I mean, we can talk about this and we can debate about this, but at what point are we like, at our next meeting on the 15th,
We're voting.
We're voting. So what's gonna bring us, each of us, closer to the point where we can make that decision?
And I would ask the board, please let us know if there's additional information we can provide to the board.
Like if we need to meet one-on-one, go over those schedules again, what they look like, then here's the pros and cons before next week, let us know.
That might be valuable.
Tom had a
I think, getting that flow chart from help will help me definitely figure out. Because the goal here, I mean, you're right, we have to stay in our lane, right, education, but we have to make everybody know that we are, you know, health is our number 2 goal, frankly, right? Like, so I won't feel real comfortable voting until I've had time to really digest that, compare it to what we've already got in place.
And I think, you know, the thing to acknowledge with that is like I said previously, 90% of what we're doing it's like it's teacher-centered. I mean, 90% of our budget goes to teachers and supporting teachers. And if we don't have the teachers, and if the teachers aren't on board with us, how are we gonna do it? It won't be possible. So we do have to give very great consideration to the safety. I think that has been done in this planning from what we know. But since it's a fluid situation, how are they handling it, the public health department, and then we have to take our cues from them. But then, you know, we have to make these decisions too that are in the best interest of the whole big picture. You know, the teachers, the students, the parents, and there's a lot of different interests to consider with this. So that's what it is, you know, just figuring out how can we help do the best with everybody in mind. And it's really tough.
And I think it was said earlier multiple times, we will not make everybody happy. And that's a hard thing, because as educators, we want to please and we want to find something, but there's enough division in here that we're trying to provide options so that people have choice. But just, I will tell you, just, you know, as you well know, a decision will need to be made on masks, and that alone is divisive, but we're gonna have to make a decision on that.
Right. But there are other options. You know, you're not just saying, this is it. There are the options of independent study.
Right.
And we will train people, we will get that to be a very solid means of kids being educated. And, you know, we have to just do what we can do. But there's, you know, we're only human.
So just as a reminder, we do have a board meeting a week from today. We are going to, as it stands right now, we're going to try to set that up at the CFA so that we can have 2 different screens going for Zoom so that people can tune in. But it would be just the board and staff socially distanced, so we don't have the large group that we had hoped to be able to have.
Okay, so should we, where do you think, what do you all think we should do at this point?
I would really like to hear more from teachers and parents as to which of the elementary schedules, the traditional elementary schedules, modified traditional, so like an AM, PM, or the alternating days. I'd really like to hear from teachers and parents which is gonna work better for them. And the same for secondary, what's gonna work best for teachers, what's going to work best for parents, and then students, you know, we brought that up as well. Let's hear what they have to say, because I think that's one piece of our decision, is which of those modified traditional schedules are we gonna go with? So
Right.
once we have that chosen, then parents can make the decision to do that modified traditional, the blended, or the online. So that's one piece, and then the mask piece, well, we're gonna have to, you know, take our cues, like you were saying, from public
Most got
health.
our hands at
And
this point.
right, but I really want to hear more feedback, so if teachers and parents can email.
To our viewing public, on our website, there is the opportunity to click on the board and email directly to the board.
Please do.
You may also email directly to me, and I will forward those communications to the board, so you do have options for doing that.
So
Yeah,
kids
just
will
to-
come back
Right.
and try and hash that out on the.
Right,
Nice
and
to hear again.
just a question about, so on the information that we've got regarding the surveys, the page that we have which indicated the secondary options and that pretty much
Right.
25%, 25%, that was all
Yeah.
split, that was parents?
Yes.
That was the parents weighing in.
Well,
But-
and also teachers, the teachers are pretty split.
And so we did this survey with the teachers as well, and it was same.
They're split. Yep. They're
Split the
not
same.
split exactly the same, but they're split.
Pretty close, right, so that really is a 3-way
Yeah.
split. And with elementary thus far, was it predominantly the AM, PM every day?
Initially, the teachers liked alternating, and they didn't like the AM PM as much. Parents liked the AM PM a little bit more, but it wasn't huge. It was like 60-40 and 40-60 either way with that kind of thing.
We don't know how tightly tied they are, these, like, we're not measuring,
Yep.
like, am I super strongly committed to this model, or is it, and it's.
It was put out, which do you prefer? What do you see the most value in kind of thing? So it wasn't like you said, it wasn't.
Yeah, no, we're not assigning like a
Right.
1 through 10 each.
So that was kind of split between alternating days, the AB
Yep.
type of thing versus the
AM PM versus alternating days was
Uh-huh.
not quite 50-50, but about 60-40
Okay.
both ways.
So getting more information on that, and are these still, I think Kevin
Teachers
said.
are there, and Kevin had his hand raised.
Oh, okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what was said before. None of the teachers I know saw that button that you showed us, John.
With the different models.
Just
Yeah,
at the
well-
secondary level.
well, we
Only
went-
being the parents I know. They were asking me what those models were, and I told them, I'm sorry, I was on the elementary meeting, I had no idea. Nor did I see the button, I didn't look close. So you might be
Yeah.
different.
Thanks, Kevin. We use that we used that same presentation in all the Monday meetings and then with DLC, and that's the one we clicked on, so that we must have just, people must have missed that step.
Maybe
But
we can find a way to make it bigger or more to see student schedules or
Right.
something.
But yeah, Kevin, if you could put the word out too of, you know, wanting to gather, we would like to gather as much response as we could. And, that, you know, that will help us in sorting through this a little better.
Since there's only, what was it, 5 pages of that?
Just wanna remind everyone, this information is on our website, along with the sample student schedules.
Hollis and Camille are still.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, did we have other hands raised? Okay, so Hollis?
Hi again. I feel strongly that, parents and teachers, didn't understand all the options, and we need to just do a better job of doing that, which I'm hearing that we're committed to doing that. And the flip side, or I guess to piggyback on that, I feel very strongly that, Model 1, it needs to be made clear that that is a year-long commitment, whereas anything else we've discussed would allow us to go in and out of options as dictated by our current situation. And so with so many unknowns, I feel strongly that it's scary to commit to a year of any one thing when there are so many things that we do not know and so much information that continually changes. And for that reason, I feel like those plans, when they go out to the parents and the teachers, it would be really nice if the bullet points that sort of briefly describe the plans were mirrored on all 3 plans. So Model 1, I think it says this is a year-long commitment, but then you go to Model 2 and 3, I don't believe there's a bullet that says this one is a toggle option that would allow us to go back and forth between distance
It does say that.
and true traditional. So it's just, I think really important that we make it as clear as possible and some consistency on the information and the key facts of each plan.
We'll continue to work on clarity, thanks.
Right, and I think
They're
also,
complex topics, absolutely.
and also making very clear that here is the link to those, the examples, the real life, real time kind of examples of what that would look like. Because I've read these things several times and I still am confused. So,
I think we would agree.
you know, it's confusing information.
It's complex and it's different than what we're used to.
In addition to the website, could we get those out on social media as well, links to the models?
And I'm more than happy to meet with anybody between now and the next Wednesday, and just let me know if you want me to walk you through. We can do it over the phone, we can do it via Zoom, whatever.
I'll
works
look
for
at the
you.
thing first and then I'll.
Okay.
And I think one last hand here
Okay.
before our new deadline, Camille.
Camille, are you there?
Yes, sorry, trying to unmute.
Okay.
Just a couple things. Number one, if you're gonna send out the info to parents, maybe figuring out a way to put it in a PDF form. I know some parents couldn't access it because it was in a Google Doc form and it was challenging to log in if you didn't have a Google account. The other thing was, you guys mentioned a survey where the teachers had initially voted, and I know we had voted after one of our Monday meetings, but I wanted to make note that those schedules were different than the schedules you're even seeing now. Some big changes were made from that Monday initial vote to the 3 that you've now been presented. And then speaking to what Paula said about model number 1, you know, as a mathematics teacher, I think it's extremely important to note that some of our kids checked out, obviously, when we went into distance learning. And if a child doesn't have a math course, say, until January of 2021, that's an extensive amount of time without math instruction, and that's the same for world language. Those are some concerns. And similarly, if a child happens to take math in the fall and then nothing until the following year, that's another just really big gap in some of the instructional concerns. And that also is a big concern, so not only for our lower level kids, but our upper level kids. In terms of AP students, that test is given once a year. First semester, they may be able to cover all the curriculum, but then they wouldn't be able to necessarily be prepared and have practiced right before. And then second semester kids, the test is in early May, so now you've cut their instructional minutes even smaller. So that's a big concern for me. And obviously, as I had said before, the AM/PM, I think it's important to note that that one at the secondary level does give the most face-to-face instructional minutes out of the three options. And thank you for letting us give feedback.
Thank you.
So I'm sensing the board would now like time to go through the material again, having heard from teachers, we'll continue to send feedback. I think any of us are happy to meet either individually on the phone, team, whatever you need to help answer questions. They are complex, they are different. It's not what we're used to.
I'd like to give a little more detail about the non-academic services, how things like nutrition and mental health and career counseling are all going to be handled as well in the various options. That's going to be really important to make sure that we do meet the needs of our kids in the non-academic areas as well.
But let's remember, we may not even have to go to this,
Yeah.
if social distancing is not enforced.
However, the food service and everything still go.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that, yeah, we haven't really delved
We
into
won't have
that.
to modify our schedules.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
we give you enough to think about?
Yes,
Oh.
thank you.
Okay, so we're going to close this meeting and then go into closed session? Sure. Okay, this meeting then is hereby adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.